My name is Mike Little, Mayor for the District of North Vancouver, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here to our regular meeting of Council for Monday, February 28th at 7 o'clock. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will someone please move adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Back. Is there a seconder on the matter? Seconded by Councillor Curran. Okay, I'll call a question on the matter. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Council, just change up just one item here. We do have two sets of minutes that have been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the minutes as presented? Hearing none, will someone please move adoption of the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Hanson, second by Councillor Back. Call the question on the matter. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. I guess I should say at the front end, we've been operating now for a few months under entirely virtual meetings. And so what that means is that all members of staff, council, the public have the opportunity to participate in our meetings through either in-person means or through virtual services. So I can say that all members of the council are present and attending the meeting tonight. And you'll see them pop up on the side screens from time to time. But we do have a full council attending this evening's meeting. Tonight, we're going to start the meeting with public input. We reserve a period of up to 30 minutes at the front end of each meeting to hear from members of the community on matters of concern to them. We have a speakers list that's been prepared through our clerk's office. If people want to participate in signing up ahead of a meeting, they can always sign up through the clerk's department to get on that list. But also we set aside the 30 minutes at the front of the meeting. If I get to the end of the speakers list and there's still time, I'll check back in both for our virtual participants and people in the chamber here to see if anybody would like to add their name to the list. But I have to tell you at this point, I have a full list. I will always encourage people to, if you don't need to take your full time, don't take your full time. That way we can get more speakers in. At this point, I'm going to invite Angela Jackson up as the first speaker. She's participating virtually this evening. And if we could have staff move over the list of speakers, that would speed the transition from person to person along. I want to confirm, Angela Jackson, I see you on the list here. Can you hear me? I'm not able to hear Angela Jackson.
Sorry, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
All right, I guess I better get going here. I do have a slideshow that I want to show, but here we go. I'm just going to have to use my time a little bit here, but
we'll start up your setup. Don't worry about that. But I can see your slides now, and I can hear you. So you're welcome to start. Oh, your slides just disappeared.
Okay, let me start again there.
There we go.
All right, here we go. All right. Okay, well, good evening, Your Worship and councillors. My name is Angela Jackson, and I am a 30-year resident of Deep Cove. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam Nations. I'm here tonight to speak on the Naughton Avenue Construction Detour Road. As a visual, I would just like to share with everyone the results from the latest public survey on what the community would prefer to see happen with the Detour Road. And as you can see, 47% of participants would like to see the road removed. As a heads up for anyone who isn't aware of what staff have ultimately recommended, it appears that they believe that an active transportation link, which happens to be the least supported choice of the community, is in fact the best choice. I think I need to brush up on how to interpret a survey because this one is a head shaker. I'm not going to spend my precious minutes trying to point out all of the negative impacts that the Detour Road has had. I will point out, though, that 551 out of 1,288 respondents called for the full removal of this road. This is not a matter of NIMBYism, as some people would like to call it. This survey proves that there are hundreds of unimpacted residents who understand the damage that has been created by building a major road through a once quiet, safe residential neighborhood. Deep Cove does not need another emergency vehicle access road. We already have 4 roads and a private strata road, which by the way is only 50 meters away from the Detour road, all leading into the village. So please, can we just take that carrot off the table? From the very beginning of this project, district staff promised Deep Cove that the opening of Naughton Avenue to traffic was only to facilitate the efficient flow of traffic during construction of the new storm sewer on Gallant Avenue. There was never any mention of technical and budget considerations, district priorities, council-approved policy documents, or any other transportation plans. There was mention of reaching out to the residents and the businesses of Deep Cove to see if there was a desire to make this opening permanent, which there was not, by the way, but staff still decided to consult with the wider Deep Cove community regardless to hear all perspectives before any decision was made. Well, staff went ahead and they did just that, and the community has responded resoundingly that they would like to see the Detour Road gone once and for all. It is now time for council to live up to the commitment and the promise that district staff made to the residents of Deep Cove right from the very beginning. A great deal of trust has been eroded due to the misleading and the less than transparent communication that some district staff have had with the community. Only now has the full intention of maintaining the Detour Road for district priorities, as stated in the OCP, become apparent. Whatever decision you make tonight, Mayor and Council, it will have a long-standing impact on what Deep Cove is going to look and feel like in the future. As it stands right now, you are asking us to put our faith into a decision made by staff who in the past determined that opening up Upper Gallant when it was in this condition during an atmospheric river was in the best interest of the community. So I really hope Mayor and Council can put aside any personal agendas that they may have tonight and actually consider the well-being and the wishes of the majority of people who took the time to respond to this and many other surveys that the district staff have asked us to participate in.
Okay, Ms. Jackson, you're over your time. Can you please draw to a quick close?
Absolutely. I'm going to finish by saying thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address council on this extremely important community item.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Michelle Sheardown. And I'm not certain, I'm assuming Michelle Sheardown is participating virtually. And there's no chance that Michelle Varley is Michelle Sheardown? No? Okay, I see a shaking head. Okay. But we don't have Michelle Sheardown on the meeting yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark that. And when I get to the end of the list, we'll double check back in and see if she's joined by that point. Maria Donovan, our next speaker, joining us here in person. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. My name is Maria Donovan. I am an elementary school principal, a mother of 2 children, and a local resident of Deep Cove. I'm also the creator of the Facebook group called Support the Restoration of Naughton Nature Park Wildlife Corridor. I have a sincere invested interest in this beautiful community, and I feel very strongly about leaving a healthy planet for future generations. Before Christmas, myself and my neighbor, John Lawless, spoke to you on behalf of 600 residents who lived in the center of Deep Cove Village. These 600 residents requested that you hear their voices, calling for the complete dismantling of the temporary road upon completion of the Colbert project, and the creation of and the implementation of a long-term plan for the restoration of the forest and the animal habitat. We spoke to you through this hard copy petition. We spoke to you through an online petition of over 4,000 signatures throughout North Vancouver. We spoke to you through the district North Vancouver's Ideas Board with 85% voting to put it back the way it was. And we spoke to you with a majority vote of 47%, as mentioned by the previous speaker, for revegetation in the subsequent online district survey. It is now time to listen to the community. The message from the voters of Deep Cove is very clear. This report to council from district staff, however, I find is not. Let me ask a rhetorical question to help clarify. If you were going to provide 1,000 people with snacks and you sent out a survey asking which snacks they would prefer, Number one, a healthy organic apple. Number two, processed applesauce with many nutrients removed. Number three, an unhealthy chemical-laden candy apple. And the survey results showed 47% wanted the healthy apple, only 21% wanted the processed applesauce, and 32% wanted a candy apple. Would you go out and spend our hard-earned taxpayer dollars on the least favorite snack or the second least favorite snack? Of course you wouldn't. It just doesn't make sense. The voters want a healthy option, even if it costs a little more than the processed garbage or the poison apple. Prior to the destruction of our forest, it was an important wildlife corridor for small and large mammals, owls, and other birds. The trees also provided drainage, sucking up large amounts of water from the land. The more crowded and developed the world becomes, the more critical these pathways become. It is essential that we put the forest back. We don't need another emergency road. We've got many, including the one that goes in through our townhouse complex. And insurance purposes mean that we can never lock that gate. So it's always open. And I've consulted with the fire department, and most of the trucks can in fact fit under the power lines in that road. We certainly don't need bikes flying down Naughton Hill at speeds as fast or faster than cars as they fly through Naughton Avenue intersection and they don't stop at the sign. Pedestrian networks are already established in this area. This is not an issue. We've had natural pathways through that forest before it was removed. Now, for those of you who have not yet made the connection, the organic apple I was referring to represents the healthy choice, the choice that helps our planet, the choice that truly fights climate change. A vision for strengthening the resiliency of natural environments does start with a natural environment. So let's work together as a community for the regeneration of our forest. This is something that everyone, as I said before, all ages can get behind and be proud of. We're counting on you to make the best decision for our children, for our future generations, and for the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria Donovan. The next speaker I have is Lauchlin Wylie. I don't have an indication as to whether Lauchlin is joining us virtually or in person.
I'm joining virtually, if that's okay.
Oh, welcome. I can hear you clearly. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Lauchlin Wylie, and I am a grade 10 student and resident of the District of North Vancouver, and I'd like to speak to item 8.9. I'm here today to talk about an issue that greatly concerns me as an aspiring marine biologist, which is Terminal 2 expansion and the consequential destruction of natural habitats of salmon and sandpipers. The addition of this terminal may seem like just a small increase. However, it strongly affects millions of creatures that rely on these salt marshes and mudflats for food. Sandpipers stay at Roberts Bank in the summer and have numbered over 500,000 a day on these marshes. Sandpipers primarily graze on biofilm, which is only prevalent in very few areas of the coastline along western North America. These birds rely on Roberts Bank estuaries before making the long and arduous journey to Alaska in the summer. The addition of this terminal will not allow the required concentration of salt to reach these banks, which helps biofilm contain key nutrients. This will make the biofilm sandpipers are eating much less plentiful and nutritious, which may cause some birds not be able to migrate successfully and die. This estuary surrounding the terminal is a prime feeding ground for many species of fish, as well as whales. Over 100 species of native creatures are facing the risk of local extinction, rely on the Fraser River estuary and surrounding marshes. This is why the addition of this terminal will have extremely detrimental effects to these ecosystems and affect all animals that reside near this terminal, including killer whales. Chinook salmon coming from the Fraser River feed on these organisms in these estuaries. These young Chinook salmon feed on high-protein organisms that won't be available because of this terminal expansion. These fish are then eaten by southern killer whales. Chinook salmon make up over 74% of these whales' diets, and salmon from the Fraser River make up a large portion of this as well. These Chinook salmon are a keystone species that will greatly impact all other species, including us, on this coastline if their numbers decline. As residents and environmental stewards of this coastline, we need to protect these delicate ecosystems and species that rely on them. If this terminal expansion follows through contrary to Environmental Canada's recommendations, it will affect us all. These species are counting on us to oppose this project. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Lauchlin Wylie. The next speaker I have is Cliff Stewart, the Vancouver Port Authority.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for the chance to speak. My name is Stewart, and I'm the Vice President of Infrastructure at the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. In addition, I'm the Executive Liaison to the District of North Vancouver. In this role, my job is to liaise with the District on port-related matters. I'm here today to speak about item 8.9 on your agenda regarding the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project. The Port Authority is leading the proposed Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project, RBT2, which is a proposed new container terminal project in Delta. This is a project that I've been personally working on for over a decade. In my role as executive liaison to the district and as a resident of the district, I was surprised to see this item on the agenda without the Port Authority having an opportunity to provide an overview to Council, particularly given the importance of this project to not only Canada, but local communities, including the district. These are important decisions, and I would suggest that taking a formal position should include fulsome information and data from the proponent. I'm here for two reasons this evening. First, to talk about why this project matters to the Port Authority and why it should matter to all Canadians. Second, I'm here to urge you not to consider Councillor Kern's motion. And if you want to consider it, to please allow me to come back next week to provide an overview of the project and answer your questions. As you know from your own experience, there's a lot of misinformation about projects out there in the public. The Port Authority is the federal agency mandated to enable Canada's trade through the Port of Vancouver, while protecting the environment and considering local communities. We work under a public interest mandate, as you do at the district. As a Port Authority, we work in the interest of all Canadians. We have a strong track record of delivering top-tier sustainable infrastructure that serves Canada's trade needs and local communities. Some enduring North Shore examples are the award-winning low-level road project and Spirit Trail extension, and more recently, the Maplewood Marine Restoration Project here in the district. For more than a decade, we've been leading the right projects for Canadians and local communities alike. These projects are actively delivering value right now in 2022 and helping our country meet global supply chain challenges from a position of strength. But Canada's trade is growing faster than West Coast port capacity is. We're running out of time to build the capacity we need, and we're staring down a future of long-term supply chain congestion in Canada if we don't act and act wisely now. That's why RBT2 is of paramount importance for all of us as we look to the future. Let me speak briefly about the environmental side, which is critical. The project has been in the federal environmental assessment process without pause for almost 9 years. At every juncture, we've been able to make project mitigations even more robust with input from communities, Indigenous groups, and scientists. For example, we recently committed to creating 86 hectares of offsetting habitat. That's about 163 football fields for Chinook salmon and Dungeness crab. We are confident that this project that's been designed for all Canadians can be built in a way that protects the environment and aligns with our vision for the Port of Vancouver to be the world's most sustainable port. Your Worship and Council, I urge you not to consider this motion without a more complete overview of the project and what's at stake for your community and the chance to ask any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Cliff Stewart. The next speaker I have is Archie Kaario. Archie Kaario participating virtually. Checking with the clerks. Have you had Archie Kaario join the meeting yet? We're not aware of Archie Kaario joining the meeting. There is one person who has joined by just an unmarked phone number. Is it *6 for them to raise their hand?
I'm present, Your Worship.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There we go. Welcome. Yes, I can. Yes, welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm here today in support of the motion created by Councillor Kieran associated with seeking to have the Roberts Bank Terminal number 2 opposed. And I've lived in the North Shore off and on for the last 50 years, and most recently in the district for the last 32 years. I have serious concerns about what the previous speaker had to say in terms of his being in favor of the project going forward. And my speaking to you tonight, I have three primary areas of focus. And certainly, one of the previous speakers spoke very eloquently about why the program or the report should not go ahead. Mr. Wylie had a very eloquent speech. I don't plan on going over much of what he had to say, but it's important to note as a general proposition, as we're entering an escalating climate crisis, which is tied in with the crisis of the extinction of numerous species, it is ever more apparent that there needs to be a change in our society's approach to numerous activities, including the way in which we carry on our industrial development. With the heat dome and flooding experience last year, we are told that this is a new normal. It is time for our society and our politicians, that is you, your worship and your councillors, to enter into a new approach to how to deal with what takes place in our environment. Mr. Wylie had many things to say about the environment in particular. I won't go into the way he did because it's going to be repetitive, but I will say an important feature that Mr. Wylie didn't perhaps have knowledge of, and neither did Mr. Stewart, and that is that there was a holdback on the submissions made to the study that took place. Climate Change Canada did prepare a report in 2019 at the deadline for submission in August, but they didn't submit it. This has recently come to light, and it's very unusual they didn't submit it because the report made very clear that serious environmental impacts were not being taken into consideration when the report results came out. And it has now come to light that that report is available and must be considered before any approval of the report going forward. And my third point of concern here is that there is an alternative that was not even part of consideration when the report was prepared, approving of the development of the extension of the Roberts Bank port, and that alternative is Ridley Island near Prince Rupert. If there has to be some form of development, it should be there. It is approximately 1.5 days less shipping time to Prince Rupert from the Asia, and that 1.5 days would equate to a substantial reduction in carbon dioxide production from the heavy bunker sea oil used by ships when they do their shipping. So that particular option wasn't on the table when they even put forward the Roberts Bank extension or expansion. And that's one of the main features that must be considered by also when they, I think, should pass Ms. Curran's very important recommendation that
Archie, Kaario, we're past your 3 minutes. I'm going to need you to draw to a close.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. The next speaker I have is Christine Elsie. Christine Elsie, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, for the opportunity to address Council. I'm speaking on the future of the Upper Naughton Detour Road in Deep Cove. And I rise to ask why the District of North Van has chosen alternative number 2 on your electronic survey with respect to the Upper Naughton Detour Road. This option 2, suggests keeping the Upper Naughton Detour Road as a permanent access and road reserved for bikes and pedestrians and sometimes emergency vehicles and for possible future route use by Deep Cove traffic. I was very surprised and dismayed by this option number 2 outcome, as our neighborhood submitted a long petition to DNV of many hundreds of names supporting option 1 road removal and reforestation, restoring the site of the Detour Road to our former beloved Upper Naughton nature area, riparian habitat, and a natural evergreen forest that was well loved by children and adults and birds alike. I also noticed the great majority of electronic respondents chose option number 1, road removal and reforestation of the Detour Road. The second choice was for option 2, the one you prefer, which had far fewer votes than number 1. Lastly, option 3 was very minimally subscribed by comparison to the first 2 choices. Nevertheless, option 1 for reforestation had many more votes than either of the other 2 and should be adopted on the basis of strong regional opinion and social license. Why is it not being adopted? Ignoring community voice and will goes against historic patterns of decision-making in Deep Cove and in the district of North Vancouver. I've lived here my entire life and remember when neighborhood desires and will mattered greatly and was respected enough to hold sway with respect to regional planning decisions. In the past, neighbors spoke out at local ratepayers meetings and voted on outcomes. Often many or most community members attended these meetings and true social license was upheld. It shocks me that the District of North Van now ignores social license and community voice and will in favor of top-down decision-making by your elected members and by staff professionals. This is not what Deep Cove has ever been about. I am wondering if it's the case that the engineering department provided their chosen solution and you've simply gone along and embraced exactly what they said. Is that what happened? Didn't our votes and petitions and all our letters and phone calls mean anything to you? What about your signs all over the district blaring, "Have your say"? I wish to put on the table a concern I have. In reading the federal government's Agenda 2030 draft on the Fed's website and looking through online federal material, I read a comment that stated municipal governments and planners in Canada are far ahead of provincial and federal governments on paving the way to Agenda 2030, which is a federal government initiative that I might add is quite controversial. Whether that be the case or not, I am led to ask how the Upper Naughton Detour decision responds to a wider unstated agenda. Perhaps this agenda,
Christine, Elsie,
yes,
can you hear me?
yes.
So you're past the 3 minutes. If you could draw to a close,
Okay,
that would be
thank you.
appreciated.
We, the Deep Cove neighbors, have spoken. We have voted on the Upper Naughton Detour decision. So why would you merely sweep our local decisions aside in favor of a top-down verdict? And in the time of climate disaster and ecological damage, we need more green space and not more roads. We're already overdeveloped as it is for the limited space that Deep Cove provides. Thank you very much.
Very much. I will respond to one aspect of that. I just want to make it absolutely clear that the recommendation is the staff recommendation, considering a great number of factors. There was a survey conducted of the community, which was to seek community opinion. It was not a plebiscite at any point. The decision-making power has rested with the District of North Vancouver Council through your representatives who you've elected to make that decision. And they obviously will take into consideration expert advice, community advice, a great number of sources, their own experiences going in and through the space as well. But that decision has not been made yet. That's the discussion we're going to be having tonight. The staff recommendation in the report is the staff's recommendation, and we'll be having our debate a little bit later. So I just wanted to make that clear that that this was not a predetermined outcome. This is the first time the council has had the opportunity to publicly debate the matter. So, okay, thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Eric Anderson. Eric Anderson is joining us virtually today. Eric Anderson, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Good evening, Mayor Little and members of council. My name is Eric Anderson, and I live at 2589 Derbyshire Way. And tonight I'm speaking as an individual and not on behalf of any organization that I may belong to. Thank you to Mr. Stewart for having updated council's code of ethics. Although I appreciate the changes in section 9.4 about the gifts received from any individual, company, group, or association, there are 2 points that I was hoping council would address before the motion gets endorsed. Number one is, although most contributions from developers via their employees, family members, board members, etc., are usually higher than $250, it would be beneficial for the community to see this limit of the gift or contribution reduced even further down to perhaps $100 or $150. Number two, my second point is far more important. As is stated in the report, transparency in local government is of utter importance, and it would have been most beneficial if the report had at the very least suggested for any members of council receiving donations exceeding the minimum amount, that he or she be at the very least strongly encouraged to recuse himself or herself from any discussion as well as voting on the motion. If possible at all, I would in fact like to see members of council be prohibited to vote on a motion benefiting a company from whom they received any donations, gifts, personal benefits, etc. It is ludicrous at best for any member of council to expect that the average citizen will not put two and two together and believe that receiving a monetary donation from a developer through one of the contacts will not affect the way that the councillor in question votes on a motion connected to the developer, such as a development proposal. You can argue as much as you want that you are voting with your conscience and that the donation has nothing to do with your vote, but nobody sane will honestly believe that. The best way to convince the public and the voters at large that you do not wish to be perceived to be in the pockets of developers is plain and simple not to accept their monetary donations at election time and any types of gifts and or personal benefits while on council. I would really like to see this addressed to ensure that full transparency is upheld in local government. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Eric Anderson. The next speaker I have is Laura Carter. Laura Carter, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I'm here to talk to you about the Naughton Detour. I live in Deep Cove. In the face of all that's going on in the world, perhaps this issue seems inconsequential, but our communities matter and green space matters. It matters for the climate, it matters for mental health, and it matters for the livability of our neighborhoods. You are voting tonight on the fate of the Naughton Detour. I live right in Deep Cove, right on Gallant, and have been in the thick of the construction. I know this work was necessary, and I understand that. Yes, it's been challenging. It went on at least, I think, twice as long as it was, we were told. Twice as many trees were taken out as we were told. There was destruction of green space, and the consequential impact on neighborhoods has happened. But equally challenging, and I would say even disheartening, as others have said, has been the interface with the district. And by that, I'm saying that in a general sense. Many of us have strong interest in and a stake in our community, and certainly you know that's the case in Deep Cove. And the community input process did not feel transparent nor genuine. Another point I'd like to make is just that the best option for this work was to level a small forest and build this detour road, just for me, defies logic. Surely other culvert or storm sewer projects occur in other parts of the district or the city without this option available. And they make it work by alternating traffic. I'm still dumbfounded that this was the best option, given all the other arteries into Deep Cove. The survey feedback and the ideas board plainly showed that the majority wants option number one, revegetation. And the fact that the staff recommendation is combines options 2 and 3 to show a majority does skew the data. I lead engagement surveys in my organization that I work for, and I know how slicing data can change the meaning. The way this whole process has been handled begs the question, and I have to say, was there an agenda from the start? Because I'm trying to understand how this is the logical conclusion. I understand that the available budget for the options for the Naughton Detour is $100,000. The budget listed for complete removal is $100,000 to $500,000. So if complete removal was really a true option being presented, should not have been budgeted for originally. Another argument, as others have said, is an additional emergency route. We have Strathcona, Cliffmont, Gallant, as well as the Strata Road. We don't need another emergency access. And tonight, I just hope you vote for our community and to complete revegetation and just heed the concerns and listen to what the community has inputted. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Laura Carter. Now, just circling back in the list, Michelle Sheardown was on the list in the second position, but I don't believe we had her connected to the meeting. Has Michelle Sheardown joined the meeting? Okay, unfortunately, Michelle Sheardown has not joined the meeting, and I'm afraid everybody had a lot of comments to make, and we ran over time for a number of people, so we do not have additional time tonight. We've been over the 30 minutes, and so I'm going to move on. Next item that we have this evening is a delegation. We have Ms. Julia Staub from Family Services in the North Shore joining us. And just to describe a slight difference with a delegation, what happens is a delegation partner is typically from a nonprofit or an organization within the community, and they're going to come and make an address to council for about 5 minutes. And then afterwards, council has an opportunity for some question and answer back and forth with the delegation. And so at this time, I'm going to call on Julia Staub. Are you, I saw you online earlier. Are you there?
I'm here.
Welcome.
And thank you, Your Worship and Council. I also want to acknowledge that I have Sonia Toretta, who's one of our volunteers, who will be speaking for a little bit of our time. I'm Julia Staub-French, for anyone else who's listening. Julia Staub-French, Executive Director at Family Services of the North Shore. And our vision is a healthy community where everyone can live full and meaningful lives. And the partnership that we have had with the District of North Vancouver, because of all of you, councillors and mayor, and your incredible staff, most notably Rosie Sindrich, who's your real estate coordinator, who's been fantastic. Because of our partnership and allowing us to use the old Delbrook Community Center for a very reasonable rent, we have made an incredible impact on our community together and with all of our staff and 547 volunteers. What I want to say about this is that we've had the space for 5 years, and that was pre-pandemic. At that time, we were serving about 1,665 people. Over those 5 years, we've increased that by almost 900 people we've served just through our Christmas Bureau program, increasing 30% in those families. But when COVID hit, here's when the magic really began, because we had an established space, thanks to you, council and mayor. And from then, we were able to respond for our community. They're ready to go. They had a place to do their work out of, all of our volunteers and staff. We began delivering groceries, 1,850 bags of groceries, over 4,000 meals for seniors, 18,000 calls to seniors who were isolated. And we could do that because we had good space. We also had a parking lot. You let us put a tent on it so we could do everything safely during COVID. I know many of you have been out to see us. And it's not a fancy building. It's an old space. And our volunteers made it so beautiful and welcoming for all of the people that we serve. I want to say a couple of quotes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sonia. One single mom said, "As a single mother, I was feeling down and needing help. The Christmas Bureau volunteers made me feel uplifted and like myself again. They are amazing, and I am so thankful for the support." Again, you helped us do that. Another neighbor in the district said, "I've set up my phone so that when I receive a call from the Christmas Bureau, it shows a picture of an angel. It makes me feel like there is someone on my side who cares about you." And although she knows that's us, I would extend that to all of you. Because you didn't need to do it. You didn't need to have the extra work to get us into that space and all the calls we'd have for we need help with this, or what about this, or can we put a tent? I mean, it's really been responsive and really supportive. I'm going to go, I'd like to say too, actually, that we've increased our volunteers. When we first had the space, we had 198 volunteers. And when you come here to the end of 2021, we had 547 volunteers. That's a 63% increase because we had dedicated space. So thank you again. Sonia, if you just come off mute, and here's one of our amazing volunteers and a district resident.
Hello, good evening. I've been volunteering with the Christmas Bureau now for 3 years. And I used to start in September and finish in December. And I was just there last week. And it was just like Julia had said, we had to pivot at the time when the pandemic happened. And we reached out to all of our clients to see how they were doing. And it was a really difficult time. I did the data entry from all the call sheets. People were calling the clients, seeing how they were doing. And there were many, many thousands of people that we had to get a hold of, and we could maybe even only complete 30, 40 calls a day. And from those call sheets, when they were entered, we could see that there was a need for food, mental health was suffering. Lots of kids had to do their online schoolwork with an iPhone. And there might have been 3 kids in the family. So there were lots, and those were only a couple of the challenges, but we were able to get together with other organizations that we needed the food to get to our clients, and they couldn't get it out the door because they had restricted hours. People couldn't stand in line for either health issues, or they couldn't stand in line with their young kids. So they needed us, we needed them, and we were able to formulate a food delivery program, which we still operate today. But I think one of the most amazing things that I saw was it wasn't just the Christmas Bureau doing this work. We connected with other places that needed help in our community. And together it's emotional to talk about, but together we were able to reach more people. More people came to us this year. We also have just as many sponsors who want to help. So during the Christmas season, families need us, sponsors want to help, and the volunteers and the organization put those two things together, or those groups of people together. Also, another thing that's happened is when companies want to donate, we could use the space at Delbrook, and we filled every square inch of it right to the very end, the parking lot. We even had a container with laundry detergent. We had hundreds and hundreds of containers, but it was a place that company came to us because they knew we would be able to forward it on. And that is happening more and more. And I think the more we get the word out that we are a caring facility, not just the Christmas Bureau, we can reach so many more people. I just can't imagine what those people would have done had we not been able to help with the food delivery, so I'm really proud to be a part of that.
Thank you very much. Closing remarks, Julie, before we go to Q&A?
Yeah, no, just, we have so many people like Sonia who actually, also during the pandemic kept themselves healthy because they had a purpose and a place to go and see the people that cared about them. So that's another amazing benefit. So yes, I'd love questions. Thank you all.
Well, on behalf of Council right out of the gate, thank you all so much for the work that you've done, and how I'm so glad that we were able to contribute the end of life period of time for the Delbrook facility. But really what's remarkable is what you've been able to do with that space during that time. I'm just gonna move receipt of the delegation. Councillor Back, you're the next up on the list. Will you be seconding the matter?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and so just to round out my comments, I've talked to many of the nonprofit organizations in our community through COVID and as we work our way out of the COVID pandemic. And so many of them talked about how they had to pull back in their services during that time, how they found it harder to get volunteers. And so it's so encouraging to hear how you guys were able to expand and grow and provide more support, more opportunities for people to get out and give back to their community. Absolutely I wanted to say congratulations on your success through that. I'm so glad that you were able to use that facility for those purposes for our community. Councillor Back, your comments and question?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Ms. Staub-French. Thank you both for your presentation tonight and giving us some of the highlights of what you've done, particularly throughout the pandemic. This one of my favorite parts of this job is hearing from organizations like yours, and when we can helping you. I went down and visited the Christmas Bureau myself during the first pandemic Christmas and was witness to the incredible work of your volunteers. And to think that you have close to 550 volunteers, that's incredible. And you're a shining example of how an organization is successfully pivoted and helped people in even bigger ways through the pandemic. So thank you very much for everything you do. Wondering if you can shine any light on the future of the Christmas Bureau, if that's anything you can talk about publicly at this point. If you have a new location, is there anything there that you can talk about?
Yeah, no, just, you know, we have so many people like Sonia who actually, also during the pandemic kept themselves healthy because they had a purpose and a place to go and see the people that cared about them. So that's another amazing benefit. So yes, I'd love questions. Thank you all.
You have a new location, is there anything there that you can talk about?
Yeah, I can. Right now we're down at Cat Mall in the bottom of the Sears box building. We're not open and operational, so I say that not wanting everyone to start coming down there. You know, it's a place to land, and we're looking about whether working closely with Quadrille, who's been really supportive as well, to see about what we can do about staying there for a longer period of time. And then there's a longer term solution that many of you know, because we've talked about it, like that we need more dedicated space. And you know, that's the goal. So we're good now. Like we're able to, we knew we had to go. We weren't going to squat and say, no, you have to make us stay here. We just felt really grateful. And then we had to make our next plan. So we're also realistic around that, you know, so, but it is the long-term. Space makes a difference. If you have the right space, you can do amazing things. So yeah, so I think we're okay for now, and we're hopefully going to have a better long-term solution when we can. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Councillor back, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I spent some time at the Christmas Bureau last year as well, and I mean it is such an emotional place to be. The work is so incredible, and I mean you guys have won the medal for the increase of volunteers for sure. I mean, you know, we've been looking at all sorts of different organizations over the years, Mayor Little, and looking at how challenging it is to get volunteers. We used to have one of the highest volunteer rates in the country for the size of community that we were, and that unfortunately has fallen. And you know, people their lives are different. It's more expensive to live here. You need 2 jobs. It's a different community, and so it's incredible that you guys had a 54% increase in your volunteers, and I think it's directly related to the work, because when you go into the Christmas Bureau and when you see what you're doing with seniors and individuals, families, how you're supporting them with groceries and that very large container of laundry detergent that I saw from my own eyes. I've seen it. I know it exists. You know, it's supporting the community, and certainly with this pandemic that we've had, you know, the emotional support is huge. And so can you just talk about the increases, what you've seen in regards to the need in the community, and talk about some of the challenges that you're facing with not being able to, you know, be able to respond to families in need because of funding?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say that also, your comment about an increase in volunteers, it is because we live in a community that really cares about the North Shore. So, you know, we just needed to tap into that. But when we set our strategic plan 3.5, 4 years ago now, I guess, that was the strategic initiative that we had around increasing volunteer engagement. And then we had to get Michelle Varley, who's here on this. You can see her here as our manager. We had to get the right infrastructure set. You got a space, like all that has to be aligned so you can scale up. So that was the key to that, but it was very intentional. So in terms of the need, I mean, the need is huge for mental health. It continues to be huge for families who are living in poverty. 24% of the North Shore still lives in great need. And, you know, mental health affects every part of our society, right? So all those combine for people to need, you know, support during isolation. The worry is COVID. We know it's, you know, it increases mental health and then the fall-on effects of everything else. So, you know, if we had enough resources, we could scale every single program up, right? So, you know, if we had, you know, double the amount of funding right now, we could do a lot more. It's challenging to keep what we're doing right now. As you know, we fundraise about $1.4 million a year as Family Services of the North Shore. That goes directly back into the community. That doesn't go over to Vancouver or abroad or wherever. So we're just a conduit for how people want to give back. That's the magic of what we can do and of why we can pivot so quickly. And that is all because of the residents of the District of North Vancouver, City of North Vancouver, and West Vancouver, and our businesses as well. So you got to pull it all together to make it work. But we can do anything with the resources, and we have plans for that.
I think it's really important, Council, to know that when you watch the operation in full swing, accessibility into the Christmas Bureau, I think it really did work perfectly at Delbert, because we were able to, cars weren't going to be able to drive in, go into the Christmas Bureau, or go in and where there were volunteers to deliver groceries. It was like an assembly line in that tent where the volunteers would come in, grab the groceries, they knew where they were going, and off they went. So the accessibility to a facility is really, really important. And also to be able to have that that air of confidentiality when, they're talking to, in regards to counseling and mental health, but also when they're going to visit the Christmas Bureau, there's a sensitivity there. And so there has to be a place where there's an ability to have privacy and have dignity going in. And I think that was really important. And I know on my visits, that was a really critical part of my visit there, making sure that I was, away from any clients that were coming in to protect that confidentiality. So I think you guys are just freaking awesome. And I just want to continue to support you as much as I can as a counselor in the municipality. And we look forward to your new home, and hopefully that's going to be for a longer term, but certainly I know your more permanent need is something that you're always looking at. And I look forward to more conversations about that with ourselves, but also our two other municipalities as well, and local governments, First Nations, and see what we can do to accommodate this great service that you provide our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor. I couldn't have said any of that better myself. Wow.
Me neither. So on behalf of the whole council, thank you very much for your presentation tonight, but your ongoing work. We do appreciate it. Council, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. The delegation is received. Thank you very much. Okay, Council. Moving on to, there's a release of a closed meeting decision that is listed in the agenda there, 6.11. And then moving on to reports, this is the regular business of the evening. I'm going to propose a consent agenda. We have several items on the agenda that I think may get the full support of the council, and consent agenda allows us to spend the remaining time focusing on the areas where we need to have more discussion. And so I propose item 8.2, which is up for adoption. So there would be no debate on the matter. This is the cannabis retail store at 1461 Marine Drive. Item 8.7, this is the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. It's for a social services grant agreement. 8.8, UBCM resolution, biodiversity crisis requires urgent species. So this is a resolution recommended to the UBCM. And 8.10, another UBCM resolution, beyond GDP, a well-being framework. And so I would recommend all of those items for consent. Would any member of council like to withdraw one of those items to comment? Jason? Nope, 8.2, 8.7, 8.8, and 8.10. Yeah, I have speakers to 8.3. Okay, I see no, sorry, Councillor Muir, I see your hand. Is that from the discussion before, or is that, okay? Okay, Council, so I'm going to move the consent agenda with 8.2, 8.7, 8.8, and 8.10. Second. Is there a seconder on the matter? Second by Councillor Murray. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. So if you are here for any of those items, 8.2, 8.7, 8.8, and 8.10, they have been passed by consent, and so that we can spend the rest of the meeting on the areas where we have more discussion to be had. Council, at this time, we're going to move on to item, I had to note, item 8.1 has actually been withdrawn from the agenda. So this item was up for adoption. This is the e-scooter proposed amendments to enable the e-scooter pilot. And we were waiting for, when we wait for that time between third reading and adoption, we're getting all the technical stuff, the document signed and all the stuff we need to. And we had a document that was set up to be signed on Friday, and it was not able to be signed in advance of the meeting. And so we're still waiting for the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure just to complete that bit of paperwork, and then we'll return the matter to a regular meeting of council as soon as reasonably practicable. So item 8.1 is withdrawn. So the first item up for discussion tonight then is item 8.3. This is development permit 42.19 for 1080 Marine Drive. I have a speaker in favor of the matter, Alex Wren. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Alex Wren, and I'm a resident of the District of North Vancouver, as well as development manager for the Staub Group, and representing the proposal for 1080 Marine Drive this evening.
Welcome.
We are a local developer, having our offices here on the North Shore for over 20 years, currently located in Lower Lonsdale. And we've most recently completed the Wallace McDowell project at 2nd and Lonsdale, which is where our offices currently are. We are proposing a 4-story mixed-use project of 35 residential units and 6,875 square feet of commercial space along Marine Drive. In a project that meets the existing C9 zoning, as well as achieves the objectives of the official community plan. We're looking forward to add a mix of new homes and new commercial space to the vibrant Marine Drive community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And you're present. Do you have other members of your group present? Is there any questions?
Our architect is present on via Zoom to answer any questions that may come from council.
Thank you very much. Okay, council, what's your pleasure? The item is up for discussion for the issuance of the permit. Okay, I'll move the recommendation. Seconded by Councillor Hanson. Okay, and once again, many of the debates that take place on developments in our community take place at an early planning stage. I remember when we did 97 public meetings for the Marine Drive plan. It was a tremendous amount of back and forth with the community over what we wanted the area to look like. And we've obviously had a lot of uptake in the interim, I want to say 12 years since we passed that item. And this development appears to be entirely within what was contemplated at that time. It was discussed with the community at that time. And so I will be in support of this issuance. Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm pleased to support the development permit. And I emphasize that what we're talking about here is a development permit on a site which has already been zoned. This isn't a consideration of the underlying zoning that has already occurred. The proposal complies with the existing zoning. The only variance being sought is in regards to off-street parking. The applicant is seeking a reduction of 72 parking spaces to 48 parking spaces. This reduction in parking complies with council policy and our intention to reduce parking infrastructure generally. Apart from that, I'll make no further comments with respect to the proposal, except to say that it complies with zoning, and I will vote for the issuance of the development permit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no further there we go. Councillor Bond, your comments.
Thanks, Mayor Little. Just maybe because these applications actually come up rather infrequently where the zoning has already been completed and we are getting a development permit, maybe just a brief explainer from staff exactly which parts of the permit are up for council consideration and discussion. I note that usually parking regulations are set in the zoning bylaw, but it seems that those zoning bylaw regulations can be varied at the development permit stage. Maybe a quick 30-second update from Mr. Milburn or another member of staff would be good on council's discretion here.
I see Mr. Hartford on the meeting. Mr. Hartford.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Bond. As has been noted, the site is zoned C9, as is most of the Marine Drive corridor. The applicant in this case has made a proposal under the zoning for the site, and staff has reviewed the proposal relative to the development permit guidelines relevant to this site. As Councillor Bond noted, there is the opportunity for council to consider variances as part of a development permit consideration. And in this case, the applicant complies fully with the zoning with the exception of parking, which is part of the zoning bylaw. And the proposal does include a variance to parking.
Okay, thanks. And I think also notes in the report that with the variance process, it actually triggers some additional requirements such as the updated bicycle parking being as part of the requirements. And so I think looking at this project, I think the parking ratio reduction is supportable. It's a frequent transit area with multiple bus lines going by, shops and employment located close by. So I think slightly less than one parking stall per household in those proposed homes makes sense for this location. So I'm supportive of the variance. Also, in terms of the kind of the technical details, I think the bike storage and the access and bike maintenance facility is also good to see. I think we're seeing that far more frequently on proposals for new homes in the district, making it very convenient and easy for people to choose or when they choose to ride their bike, and it's very easy, just as convenient as when they choose to take their car. The one question I did have, maybe one brief question for the applicant, is I know in the report, the initial public information meeting was conducted in 2019. Maybe a comment on what took 3 years to get to this point. And then also a question for staff. I think it's mostly addressed through the design of this particular building, but in other places along Marine Drive, I'm thinking specifically of Pemberton and Marine, where we've had commercial storefronts, and the idea of Marine Drive and the guidelines is to have, small shops and create a street and a feel of activity on Marine Drive. But in certain locations, it's the retail has actually been located inward towards an internal parking area. I'm thinking specifically of the White Spot and the TD Bank along Marine Drive, leading to a very dead and bland streetscape on the front. But I think that's mostly addressed through the design elements of how this building has been designed. But maybe a comment from staff on how that design detail and that feel of having smaller commercial units fronting Marine Drive is addressed through this design.
We'll look to Mr. Hartford for a response.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Bond. There are 4 commercial units in this project. They range in size from 1,200 square feet to 3,400 square feet. The larger commercial unit is intended to be leased by the existing tenant of the site, Blue Shore Financial, so they will remain on the property. The building has been designed with the primary entrances of the commercial units fronting on Marine Drive or on Lloyd, the flanking street. So we do not expect to see a situation where the doors to Marine Drive are locked off and access is taking place from the parking at the rear.
And maybe the delay from the applicant?
I don't know if you can provide just a quick comment about it, just why the public information meeting was in 2019 and it's taken, sizable time.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I can't speak to the details of how long stuff took with the discussions with staff. It has been a process working through all of the requirements, engineering requirements as well. The adoption of the alternative vehicle parking rates policy by council and our decision to reduce the parking count from the 72 stalls to 48 did add a little bit of time to that, but I don't believe it was a significant amount.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray, your comments?
Thank you. I'm just going to go along the same lines in regards to the size of the commercial units. So there's 4. One's 3,400 square feet, and the other ones are 1,200. Is that right, Mr. Hartford?
Your Worship, Councillor Murray, that's correct.
Okay. So do we have a maximum size on the commercial units?
There is a maximum size.
What is that?
Off the top of my head, I think it's 34,000 square feet, so far in excess of the CRUs proposed here.
Right, but I think that's what that suggests, Council, is that they could consolidate the units into one. And again, we go down that road of having, retail space taken up by professional businesses and less of the, eclectic nature of multiple different kinds of businesses being able to support a local area. If you drive along 10th Avenue in Vancouver, if you go down to Lower Lonsdale in the city of North Vancouver, and really, most of Lonsdale still, thank God, the eclectic nature of small business, mom and pop shops, businesses that are actually serving residents, not regional draws, is very evident. And, Broadway, the Broadway corridor, Blenheim, McDonald, those areas are so busy. They're dense communities, but they're so busy on the street of retail because they have maximum sizes in their zoning bylaws. And, the idea that a professional business can come in and take a whole block, it's not allowed. I continue to bring this up as a concern. And, it just means that people that are living in this area of density are having to get in their car and travel elsewhere for goods that support everyday living. The baker, the butcher, the candlestick maker, they don't exist anymore because it's turned into a regional destination. And I really think that we need to look at amending these bylaws to be able to include possibly another floor above the retail to accommodate the professional offices and leave the retail at grade for those smaller units to be able to create that hustle and bustle, because it's not there. It's such a lost opportunity. I really think we erred when we didn't consider, watching what was occurring and dealing with it then. I do like the aesthetics of this building. Again, the repetitive design on Marine Drive really needs some work. But I do like the bright building of this one square. But I hope the applicant will really consider keeping the remaining units small and even cutting them in half to be able to provide some, smaller space for business to exist.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Murray. And I will actually just go to Mr. Stewart for a quick comment on that, because you have raised this issue a number of times and we have been in discussion, and I think now we're preparing an upcoming workshop that will be addressing that issue. Mr. Stewart, can you speak to that?
That's correct, Your Worship. We're looking at a workshop in March or early April to discuss. Councillor Murray has raised 3 different issues with respect to Marine Drive, and I've asked staff to include in a report an opportunity for council to come in on all of those, because I think they've been around for a while and we haven't addressed them. I apologize for that, but I think we need to have a discussion on them, and so we've scheduled a workshop for that.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Murray. Any other member of council wishing to add their comments? Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, council. All right, moving on to item 8.4. Mr. Wardell, you have an opening presentation. Can I just inquire as to how many slides this one is? I didn't catch up with you today on it.
Through your worship, there is no presentation tonight. Will be verbal.
Okay.
So through your worship, tonight, final public input will be received on the 2022 to 2026 financial plan. Over the past weeks, staff have received a number of questions online and in emails as late as this afternoon. Tonight, Mr. Daniluk will provide some opening remarks to introduce where we're at in the process. So over to Mr. Daniluk for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Wardell, and good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public listening in. I have a few brief comments before turning this back to the Mayor. The financial plan was introduced to Council and the public 3 weeks ago on February 7th, with public input on the plan opening the next day. Staff have received and responded to questions from the public since then, and also met with the community associations on February 16th to receive their feedback. Tonight, there is an opportunity for any opening remarks from Council on the financial plan, though the majority of the discussion is intended for Council deliberations on the plan next week on Tuesday, March 8th. Staff will provide a summary of public input received later this week. Tonight also provides an opportunity for Council to receive any direct input from the public. This financial plan responds to these challenging times by providing resources that strengthen our operations, mitigate and manage new risks, and move forward with Council priorities in a changing economy. The plan assumes a return to normal levels of inflation over the next 2 years, though we'll continue to monitor and assess risks and impacts. Our approach compares well in the region, and we continue to advocate for the district's financial interests with other levels of government. We see opportunities for alignment between this financial plan and the recently released provincial budget, and we'll be exploring opportunities that benefit our ratepayers. And with that, I'll turn it back to the Mayor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Daniluk. Members of Council, what is your desire? Okay.
I thought we were having, so there's no public input on this?
Yeah, correct. We have two members of the public. Sorry, Councilor Mayor, we do have two members of the public that are signed up to speak on this item. And so I'm going to go to Herman Ma first. Herman Ma, can you hear me? Oh, hey. I can see you're in person. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. Herman Ma, 1252 West 21st Street, North Vancouver.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm a member of various committees and associations, but I'm here to speak as a private citizen. First, I want to acknowledge I'm on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. Just two quick comments. As Rick mentioned, he's spoke to North Van a couple weeks ago. First, the plan speaks to spending and not a projected increase. You know, as a taxpayer, when I deal with home budgets, you know, I also look for cuts and savings in my spending. It would be interesting to know where the district has saved money and made cuts in the last couple of years, maybe in future reports. And second, I fully understand the 4 key council priorities mentioned in the plan. But I do notice out of the 79 pages, I found only 3 references to Indigenous relations. In the spirit of reconciliation, it would be helpful to see more of a focus on this important matter in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if we can get a response from Mr. Daniluk. Do you have a comment on how best to assess out reallocation of funds due to COVID?
Through your worship, if the question was on cost savings and the approach that we use, I believe that was the first question. There is a fairly structured process in place to review our ongoing programs and adjust spending levels and revenues to align with the principles and strategies in the financial plan. And those are reflected in the planning framework section of the plan. And sorry, I missed that follow-up question.
I believe the follow-up question was about the inclusion of First Nations engagement in the budgeting process.
That's something I'll have to follow up on. I know in our staff-to-staff relations, there's ongoing discussions on programs and participation within our services, and likewise through the agreements that we have with them. So, but I can follow up on that.
Your Worship, if I could just comment, there are substantive investments in both training and relationships with First Nations in the budget. In the scheme of things, that may not appear in a multi-million dollar budget, but I can assure Council that we've certainly taken the direction that we received from Council with respect to providing training and adjustments to our practice and processes with respect to First Nations, and we are following up with that.
Mr. Joyce had an additional comment?
Yes, Your Worship. If I could add, the engineering group as well have started to incorporate archaeological assessments and evaluations in our capital works program. So that'll be an ongoing program that will be introduced as we do major capital works in the district going forward.
Thank you very much. Next public speaker I have is Peter Teevan. I believe Peter's participating virtually.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
If you'll just pause for a second, I'd just like to share screen. I've got some slides to show you. Are you able to see that all right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. I'll start. Thank you, Worship. Peter Teevan, 1900 block Indian River Crescent. Speaking with some comments, just kind of trying to contextualize the budget that we're looking at. Each year we seem to be budgeting what we typically refer to as a modest 2% plus 1% for infrastructure renewal or asset renewal. And we kind of congratulate ourselves that when we're compared with our peer municipalities, the 3% seems quite modest. And we use reserve funds to keep our tax increases under control. But many ask, and I'm wondering, does that mean our spending is under control? And I'm going to show you a couple of slides of why I think that's not. I've pasted here, and I've sent to you earlier today the link to where I got the data from the Provincial Ministry of Finance that is aggregated for the last 15 years. Specifically, I'm looking at Schedule 402, which is expenses. Now, what I've done here, just to explain, is I've charted a couple of categories of expenditures, and those are the blue bars that you see. And the percentages that you see is the cumulative growth through each year. And the orange line that you see is the inflation rate as reported by the inflation calculator on the Bank of Canada's website. And what you'll see is almost in every case, our spending is by far outgrowing expenditures. So this is the overall spending category for the District of North Vancouver. Here is just the category general government. From my point of view as a business person, I would see this as overhead expense. And what you can see here, it's just off the screen for me, but you can see a 29.9% increase in inflation, but a 189% increase in spending on this category. I can't see how that is sustainable over the long term. By contrast, here's the City of North Vancouver, also up substantially with their overall spending, but significantly less growth, 62% growth in their general government fund spending. The other thing that I think is pertinent is there's another schedule, number 704, that shows the tax burden on a representative house. Now, I'm not the expert on what representative house means. Perhaps Mr. Danilek could respond to any questions you have. But there's a reason why we can afford to keep our increases relatively low, and that's because we're already the 10th highest municipality in the entire province. Now, I've listed 25 here. There's about 165 municipalities in the province of BC. We are the 10th highest. City of North Vancouver, 15th, all over $1,000 less on the representative house of taxation. I've written to you all telling you I've got these statistics for all the municipalities and they're available to you. I certainly plan to expand this and look at other schedules, taxation revenue and so on. I also want to compare them on a per capita basis. But I really want to recommend that you have some annual workshops where you dedicate to drilling down and looking at this so we can determine best practices, see who the leaders are in controlling spending, and find out what it is that they're doing. This is a list of the schedules that are available, and I certainly will try to work through them myself and come up with some models for you to look at. But with that, I thought it would be pertinent just to consider, you know, we say 2% and 3%. We are already the 10th highest in all of BC. And I think that our average resident will be pretty concerned about that. With that, I'll always say thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Teevan. I'm sure staff noted them. In a lot of those cases, it's difficult to compare apples to apples here because in a number of the years recently, and particularly because we've been involved with the provincial government in a number of infrastructure, we have flow-through funds that come from the provincial government. It counts as spending on our books, but it's some flow-through. We also, when we say 3% 2+1, we're just simply referring to a very narrow part of the budget, which is the amount of revenue that's coming from residential taxation. And so when the expenditures, so if there's other sources of revenue, fees that are coming from development and going back into the community in terms of community amenity contributions, fees that are flow through from other levels of government, that those increases on that side are not a part of the calculation of what is collected from the parcel tax for the residential class, which is only increasing, has only been increasing by 2 and 1 over most of the years in the last, going back to 2004. And then there was 1 year that we just did straight up 2. And so I don't think that there's an inaccuracy there. That is what we've been changing the tax roll by, but you're quite correct. That doesn't mean the expenditures are changing by that same amount because they're affected by a great number of other sources of revenue and spending. Mr. Danlock, did I get that right?
You covered it really well, Your Worship. I might add just a couple other points. When we're looking at levels of spend, we also need to consider other things like service levels, the local area, geography, of course, financial policy. With this council and previous councils, we've been focusing very hard on asset management and the stewardship over our assets. We've actually been working with the province on changing some of the local government reporting to start so that they could start to report out on how local governments are performing with that stewardship responsibility. And there are other layers to the level of spend. You covered most of them. Metro Vancouver increases factor into the level of spend, and so do the other matters like growth. And so it is hard to baseline against these numbers, but we are happy to sit down and go through the information with Mr. Teevan if you'd like.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Stewart, your comment?
Yeah, just briefly. Comments or observations on expenditures that are not in context with the revenue and the changes to municipality and the capital projects that we're involved in are not necessarily particularly helpful, nor are they a reflection, in fact, on how well we're doing financially. Staff have really done, I think, an incredible job at the end of the day of controlling our expenses within the context of what the obligations are that we have. And so I would just say that just one observation on expenditures out of context is not particularly illuminative for council or the community.
Yeah, and not to take away from Mr. Teevan's comments, he's absolutely correct that we still have a responsibility to manage expenditures in the community. All my comments were to say actually both can be correct. Both our budget increase as it pertains to residential taxation can be at 3%, even though the expenditures could have increased by a higher amount. That's all I just wanted to say, is that both can be correct. But when it actually comes down to same for same, if you take $1.5 million house in the city of North Vancouver and $1.5 million house in the district of North Vancouver, you actually pay about $100 less tax in the district of North Vancouver. And so the chart that was showing what tax is paid on an average house within the community, and because they have more apartments, they actually have a lower average value. But if you take a house that's $1.5 million on the north side of Queens and a house that's $1.5 million on the south side of Queens, they will actually pay less in the district of North Vancouver. Councillor Murray, your comments?
And where you're wrong, Mayor Little, is that there's no houses in North Vancouver worth $1.5 million.
I deserve that. I deserve that. That's my fault. Sorry, Councillor.
I don't think it's funny at all. I think it's really sad. It's a disgrace where we are with the cost of housing today, and all this work that we've done to date has yet to produce the lower values and the affordability that our OCP said that it would do if we densified. It's actually going up, not down. And then the census results that we got, I hope we're going to have a discussion about the census results just to apply them back to our OCP and the direction that we're going in, because they certainly need to be analyzed. I'd just like to thank both speakers, Mr. Ma and Mr. Teevan, for their presentations. And certainly Mr. Teevan does a lot of work in regards to the budget and data collection. And I'm always very appreciative of it. And I hope that we can have, I know Mr. Daniluk talked about sitting down with Mr. Teevan to go over these things, but I think it's really important to sit down with all of council and have a workshop on this, as Mr. Teevan suggested, because these budgets have grown extensively over the years. The complexity of the budgets, they're out of the stratosphere compared to what they were 20 years ago. The amount of spending, the amount of capital, the amount of growth that's bringing, assets to our community based on community amenity contributions, but ultimately they are becoming depreciating assets on our books, and we have to consider that. And then there's that issue of just everything going up in price, gas, food, housing, everything. I was at the grocery store today and half the shelves were bare. It's a super unnerving world that we're living in right now, the implications of our world, what's happening around the globe, and the costs of living in this community are becoming very, very challenging. There's only one taxpayer, and we've got some big numbers from Metro coming, and we really need to make sure that we recognize that we do want to try to create a sustainable community, but as it becomes more unaffordable and more costly to be here, I don't know how we're going to achieve that. And I really think that we need to start having some significant discussions on our path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Mr. Stewart, I see your hand up. Was that from before?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Back, your comments.
Thanks, Your Worship. I know we've had the virtual public input on the draft budget. I was just wondering if staff could comment on how that's gone and when how we'll be receiving that input.
Daniel?
Through Your Worship, the activity is a little bit more than prior years, not as much as we would have liked to have seen, but there's a little bit more input, and it is nice to see it online. There's some conversations going on, and we'll be providing a summary of that input later this week.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes. And again, council doesn't have to make their whole comments now. There will be opportunities for council to make comments going forward as well. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, I'm holding my comments to the 8th, but I just wanted to follow up on something Councillor Back just mentioned. Will we be able to see, or can we see, I haven't had time to look online, but can we see the actual questions and answers, all of them, and not just a summary? Will can we see that now, or will we be able to see that?
Donovan?
Through your worship, the information is available online. There were emails that were received, and we'll be providing a complete summary, just as you suggested.
I always am curious when you say summary, because is that staff doing a summary, or will we actually see the data behind it?
You'll see the original questions and staff's responses.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so those were the only two that had signed up in advance, but I am going to now go to members of the public in the gallery and virtually to give them an opportunity to speak. And I see Hazen Colbert's hand in the attendees group, and so I've just sought to promote you up to a panelist so you can share your views. Hazen Colbert, can you hear me? Just still connecting. Hazen Colbert, can you hear me? Okay, sometimes it takes a moment. Hazen Colbert, you're muted. Can you hear me?
Because somebody muted me.
Oh, there we go. Now I can hear you.
Meryl, can you hear me?
Yes, it's quiet volume, but I can hear you, Hazen. Yes.
Oh, can you see me? I hope not. No, I hope not. I'm not. It was a long day for me today. Very long. I'm exhausted. With respect to the budget, there's been, tonight there was much talk about sustainable versus unsustainable. And every budget is sustainable in the public sector because the taxpayer, at least in the developed nations, is assumed they will always be able to shoulder the increased expenses. So let's put that one aside. Every budget is sustainable. The issue becomes, is every expense logical? Does it make sense? Is it something that should be done? And W. Dunn always had these words, Mayor Little. He would say, something like, should we do this? Can we afford to do this? Do we really need to do this? And that's how I look at much of the budget. And I see a lot of the things in the budget, which I kind of question. Why are we involved in these things? And I'm going to go back to the resolutions tonight. There was a resolution that's been put forward in which council is being asked to oppose the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 expansion. And this is interesting to me because this council and the District of North Vancouver has absolutely no standing in that matter. No standing at all. You're going to spend a lot of money on this. You have no standing. In fact, no municipal council has any standing because Roberts Bank is being built offshore. So the only standing is the standing that the federal government has allowed various stakeholder groups. And one of them is First Nations. But no municipality in the province of BC, no municipality in Canada has any standing in this matter. So why bother spending money on it? You have no standing. You can submit as many resolutions as you want. It's just all press and bantering before an election, a municipal election in 2022 in October. The people that have standing are those people that have credible knowledge, the biologists who hold PhDs, who've done studies, they've been peer reviewed, maritime law lawyers, economists with PhDs in economics, business people with MBAs, the artists communities and the high school children, even though it's wonderful to hear from them, they have no standing. So as we look at these things that the DNV want to do, let's strike away all the stuff that has nothing to do with the municipality and see how much money we can strike away, how much money we can eliminate. And let's ensure that going forward, our municipality focuses on the things that municipal governments have been discharged to do under the Local Government Act, under the Municipal Act, and under the Local Community Charter. And not get involved in things that are federal matters, such as legalizing cocaine, selling it through vending machines, you know, stopping the expansion of the port in Roberts Bank, trying to stop the expansion of the Surrey boundary. None of this has anything to do with the DNV. And that's all I'm saying. I'm going to stop there. All I'm saying is one of the ways you control expenses is you eliminate all the stuff that has nothing to do with your job. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Colbert. It's the council still hasn't had their debate on that matter. That debate will be later this evening. I think either way they go, it probably won't represent a large expenditure. I think it's just contemplating sending a letter of support. But at the same time, it's an important thing to remember that our first priority is to provide the core services that cannot be provided by other levels of government, and we need to remain focused on that. Councillor Forbes, your hand is up. Did you have a comment? That's from earlier. Okay. Council, I see no further speakers from yourselves or from the members of the public. As this is, oh, sorry, I did have one more speaker here. Juan, Palacio is going to come and speak. Welcome.
Hello, Your Worship, and members of the council. I don't know if I personally misunderstand parts of the budget and what the council can and cannot spend money on, or like what the district can. But I believe that perhaps the district could have a budget for charitable expenses. For example, to donate to local or other charities, perhaps international. With the current crisis in the Ukraine, there are several charities for that. And there's also always municipal issues and some at other levels. I was wondering if these budgets do include something like that, like a fund for charitable resources and stuff like that. Sorry for my...
Yeah, no, thank you very much for your comments. It's important. So my office has some discretion to give out $1,000 grants. Obviously, that's not going to be, for major world events like that, but the vast majority of our charitable and social givings go through public bodies such as the CSAC, the Community Services Advisory Committee. They make decisions on where funds go in our community. So yes, they have a significant portion of the budget goes to CSAC and also for our core funded agencies, which also are social services charitable in nature. Mr. Daniluk, can you cover any other bases if I've missed any?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we're looking at financial supports for not-for-profit organizations locally, you're quite correct. It's through the community grants. It's through low dollar leases and permissive tax exemptions for the most part. There's other programs as well, but those are the three main ones.
And the council can add its discretion. It is lawful for the council to decide in a public forum that they're going to make a contribution to another body. That is within our ability. We would have to identify a source of funds at that point, whether it's from a council contingency or from some other point in the budget. But it's allowed, it's lawful, as long as it's done entirely publicly.
All right. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Okay, I see no further speakers at this time. So there isn't an official motion that takes place upon this receipt. Our requirement is to provide the opportunity to, so there's no motion that we have to entertain. I will say that we have exhausted the speakers list, and so I'm going to be moving on to item 8.5. Thank you very much, the members of the public, for participating. The next item we have up for discussion tonight is the Naughton Avenue construction detour. At this point, I'm going to note that I have a speaker against, and I'm just going to check in with Mr. Joyce. You have a couple of comments and you have some slides, or would you prefer that I have the public speaker up first?
Your worship, maybe I'll start with a comment and go to the...
Excuse me. Sorry, Councillor Kern, you have a comment?
Yeah, just that I have previously recused myself from this debate because I own a business on Gallant Avenue, and so I will be recusing myself again for any perceptions around a conflict of interest.
Thank you very much. And just to be clear on what our expectation is then.
Yeah, I'm like, then what happens?
Is it satisfactory for Councillor Kern to be moved out of the meeting during the discussion to as a panelist, and then we move her back in at the time that we move on to the next item, Mr. Clerk, or does she need to entirely leave the virtual meeting?
She needs to leave the meeting.
Entirely leave the virtual meeting. Okay.
Whatever that means, leave the meeting. That would be not as an attendee. That's equivalent to sitting in the gallery.
And so we have verified that a staff member has the capability to text her and bring her back to the meeting in a timely fashion?
We'll sort that out behind the scenes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, your declaration is in order.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so back to you, Mr. Joyce, your comments?
My comments, Your Worship, is Ms. Moxon has a few slides this evening to introduce the staff report tonight. But I do want to stress the engineering staff report is we're looking at increasing mobility in the road allowance. And really tonight we're seeking direction from council to do any more work on any concept, as there's been no design on any of the options at this point in time. So while we have a recommendation, we are seeking some direction as well from council tonight. But we do have about 5 slides to introduce the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Ms. Moxon?
All right, I will share my screen here. Hang tight. Are you seeing the first cover slide?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have 5 slides and would like to take a few minutes to summarize the report to Council about the Naughton Avenue Detour. I will provide an overview of the engagement process that the district carried out to ensure community concerns and ideas for the future of the Naughton Avenue right-of-way were heard and taken into consideration. I will present the results of the most recent online survey that closed last December. Lastly, I will discuss the other factors, including a technical analysis, financial considerations, and alignment with other strategic directions that staff considered when developing the final recommendation for the Naughton Detour. The need for a construction detour in Deep Cove was identified in late 2020 during final design of the Gallant Storm Sewer Replacement Project. A detour was needed to ensure the smooth flow of traffic in and out of Deep Cove during the busy summer months and avoid gridlock during installation of the large diameter storm pipe on Upper Gallant. The detour was built on an unconstructed section of the Naughton Avenue Road right-of-way, shown as a dashed green line in this graphic. While the detour was essential to the success of the sewer replacement project by helping to avoid backups approaching the village core, reducing delays to commuting residents, and improving safety at one of the district's busiest intersections for pedestrians, which was at Gallant and Panorama, the detour also resulted in impacts to residents living closest to the detour through the loss of trees and by bringing more traffic into a part of Deep Cove that previously only saw low volume local traffic. The detour is currently in a temporary configuration with temporary lighting, 1 layer of pavement, and only hydro seeding for revegetation. More significant revegetation was deferred until a decision is made on the future use of the detour. The project has a budget of $100,000 to rehabilitate the detour once it is no longer needed for construction. A full community engagement process and technical analysis have been completed to help inform a decision on the future of this right-of-way. The community was asked to help generate ideas for the future of this right-of-way through the Digital Ideas Board that was posted for several months starting in March 2021. 3 broad directions emerged from this process: ideas for environmental protection and reinstating the area to previous conditions, ideas for active transportation, such as walking and cycling, and ideas for vehicle transportation.
Each of these group of ideas or directions then underwent an engineering evaluation of high-level technical and financial feasibility. The community was then given an opportunity through an online survey to indicate their preferred direction. Direction number 1 focused on revegetation, or putting it back the way it was. This direction would return the area to primarily natural conditions through revegetation and would include the removal of all transportation-related infrastructure. It may or may not include removal of the fill that was brought in to construct the detour. Direction number 2 focused on creating an active transportation link and emergency access. This direction would convert the detour into an active transportation link that would support walking and cycling, as well as emergency vehicle access through the use of bollards. Transit or other buses would not have access. This option would not likely require additional widening of the existing detour or additional vegetation removal. Vehicle circulation would go back to pre-construction conditions, and increased vehicle traffic would be eliminated from Naughton Avenue. Direction 3 focuses on creating a full transportation link. This direction would transform the detour into a permanent multimodal transportation link, supporting walking, cycling, transit, goods movement, driving, and emergency services. This link would need to be wider than the existing detour, likely require retaining walls and additional fill, and likely would have additional impacts on vegetation. It would provide a new vehicle route into Deep Cove, reducing queuing and congestion, improving overall area circulation, and increasing the road network redundancy. Public input was just one of the factors staff considered when weighing the 3 directions and developing their recommendations. An engineering consulting firm, Urban Systems, who were also the lead consultant on the OCP targeted review, were engaged to conduct an evaluation of the directions against defined district priorities as stated in the Official Community Plan, or OCP, the OCP Action Plan, and the Transportation Plan, as well as interests of the Deep Cove community as expressed through previous public engagement. Each direction was evaluated based on their influence on key criteria, including mobility, safety, community, and social equity. Taking all of these considerations into account, including the technical review, staff are recommending direction number 2 that would create an active transportation link and emergency access. Direction number 2 is more closely aligned with district priorities compared to the revegetation direction because it enhances the cycling and walking network within this community. It has less impact on adjacent residents compared to the full transportation link because it removes increased traffic from Naughton Avenue. It likely does not require additional vegetation removal, and in fact would likely allow for revegetation of a significant portion of the existing disturbed footprint. It is cost effective in that it can likely be delivered within the existing budget depending on the final design. From an emergency services perspective, it increases the redundancy of the transportation network by creating an alternate means of access, both for response and for evacuation. Here are the results of the online survey, which, as mentioned, are only one factor that were taken into consideration in developing the staff recommendations. The most popular choice is direction number 1, with just under half of respondents preferring to remove and revegetate the detour. Just over half of respondents saw value in retaining the detour in some form, either by converting it into an active transportation link for walking and cycling, or transforming it into a full vehicle link for all road users. Many survey participants took advantage of the available comment box to provide additional comments. 100 pages of verbatim comments are included in the Naughton Avenue Detour community feedback results that are appended to the staff report. After considering these results, along with the qualitative evaluation of the 3 directions and financial and technical considerations, staff recommend the district implement direction number 2 because it supports stated district priorities around safe, efficient, and connected cycling and pedestrian networks, and strengthens the resiliency of the built environment by improving road network redundancy and providing a secondary emergency access into the village core. Direction number 2 is also cost effective and is less impactful to adjacent residents when compared to direction 3. In closing, staff recommend that council receive the community engagement results for information and that staff are directed to implement direction number 2, active transportation link and emergency access. Should council endorse implementation of any of these 3 directions tonight, staff will begin developing concept options that take into consideration comments received tonight from council and from the community through the public engagement process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Erin Moxon, for your presentation. Council, I see Councillor Forbes has her hand. Oh, sorry. Before I go to council, I do have a public speaker signed up. John Lawless, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. John Lawless is joining us in person here in the council chamber. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. My name is John Lawless. I've lived in Deep Cove for the last 19 years. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for this opportunity to address the issue of the staff's recommendation for the Naughton Avenue detour. I want to especially thank the councillors and your worship as well, who took the time to visit the Naughton Avenue and to listen to the residents, myself and other residents who spoke to the issue. Thank you for taking the time, and also thank you for giving our views so much time. But Ms. Moxon warned us that very early in the game, warned us that we would have to fight very hard to have the detour removed. So in that sense, we've been forced into a corner somewhat to take the time that we have to discuss the issue with you. 3 minutes to debate the technicalities and conclusions of the staff report is pretty inadequate. However, there are a few comments I'd like to make. Briefly, staff claims that the active transportation route is somehow safer. I dispute that. The detour is very steep and many cyclists still refuse to obey traffic signage and are regular menace to seniors. It appears the only way to force cyclists to obey the speed limit and stop signs is to install barriers, as has already been done. If barriers to slow cyclists are installed, the route is no longer useful for emergencies. And also note that by definition, active transportation includes transit, not just cycling and pedestrian use. So under direction 2, the detour will have to be upgraded and maintained over the long term for bus use. As it stands, the steepness of the detour is a hazard for emergency services and buses. And these costs to upgrade and maintain for bus use, I don't believe were included in Ms. Moxon's cost considerations. As for emergencies, there are already at least 4 routes into and out of Deep Cove. This includes Deep Cove Crescent that directly parallels the detour only meters away. Ms. Donovan referred to this as well. Do we need another empty road to maintain forever when we already have so many access ways into the cove? Another point is that in the case of an emergency with traffic blocking Deep Cove Road, traffic would likely block the detour as well, rendering it useless. I find one of the most remarkable conclusions of the recommendation number of staff is this: that somehow clear cutting the green space and dumping tons and tons of hot asphalt and gravel in place somehow supports, and I quote, community resiliency against climate change. This to me is a particularly egregious example of greenwashing and gaslighting. My time is almost up. Ms. Moxon or the council has heard that 72% were in favor of complete removal. 600 residents came out on their porches to talk to a stranger during Delta COVID and signed their support for complete removal. And finally, the survey, 47% of respondents, almost 50% more than the next option, support complete removal. Ms. Lauchlin said repeated time and time again that her credo that DNV listens to the community. Is that in fact the case, or does this mean that so-called high-level technical considerations will sway the council beyond what the residents have to say. We're asking for a motion to choose direction number 1 for complete removal of vegetation. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much. Okay, the first speaker I have signed up to speak is Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson, do you have a motion?
Yes. I'd like to move that direction number 1.
Your worship, can't seem to hear Councillor Hanson.
Oh, is this your microphone on? The green light there? Oh, sorry about that. We're going to have to ask you to start again. Keep that one on the record.
My mistake. My apologies. I'd like to move that recommendation number 1 be substituted as the staff recommendation. So the motion would be that we have received the report for information and that the staff proceed with implementing direction number 1, which is revegetate, put it back the way it was before.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Forbes. Councillor Hanson, your comments?
Thank you very much. I support option number 1, revegetate, put it back the way it was before. As to whether we should incur the costs involved in removing the fill, or at least some of the fill that was brought in to construct the detour, we'll need more information before I can comment further on that. Although I understand that there would be some uses to which the fill could be put, so it might not be as expensive to remove the fill as we might think. I believe that this option, putting it back the way it was before, respects both the will of the community and the process that got us here, and also, in my view, represents the best option for preserving the character and livability of the cove. In my view, when the district initially put through the Naughton bypass to facilitate the Gallant Avenue storm sewer replacement project. And let me say that I have no criticisms of that decision. We were required to put through the bypass in order, in my view, to facilitate that sewer replacement program. But the community was told, I believe, that the Naughton bypass would not be permanent and that the next steps as regards to the Naughton bypass would be determined after obtaining community input and the will of the community would be respected. The district conducted a survey and solicited the views of close to 1,300 residents. And of course, there were other outreaches occurred. There was a petition. There were the other views expressed. But of the 3 options put forward, just focusing on this survey, putting it back the way it was before was favored by far the largest plurality. I believe it would be disrespectful to this process not to favor the option selected by the largest group of community members. Above and beyond that, I favor putting it back the way it was before because I believe this area will serve, as it did in the past, as an important urban green space, providing habitat for our natural world and improving the livability of the cove for all residents for all time. Second, I do not believe that the highest priority for the cove is the expansion of transportation routes to and from at this location. There are a variety of routes in and out of the cove, and those routes are sufficient. I believe we must seek in our planning to represent the character and feel of this community, its histories and qualities as a neighborhood, and that we can do all of that best by returning this site to its original character. I will not say anything further about the process except to say that in my view it would be a great mistake to survey nearly 1,300 residents and then to implement the proposal that had the support of the least number while rejecting the proposal that had the support of the greatest number. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Forbes, your comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. Depending on the results of this vote, what I was going to do was move that we bifurcate the two recommendations there for staff, but I'll wait till after the vote on this, the way Councillor Hanson has put it forward. I too would also like to say that everything that I've heard, and I've gone out and spoken with a lot of the people out there, and I've gone out there several times, even on my own, to just watch. And everybody out there that I speak to was not happy with the idea that this would be permanent. They were told it was going to be temporary. And so that's what started to get them really concerned. I think the livability of that particular short street or two street block has been demonstratively lowered. The home there had to go through a heat dome. And I know when I stood out there, and I think it was in the middle of the two heat domes, and I stood out there and talked to some residents right in front of that home, and I had sweat running down my back, my legs. I was drenched within about an hour of standing there. So I can only imagine what those people in the apartments were, how they were feeling. So I think that there was a purpose. There was a very good purpose to have green space there. And trees for shading and things like that. The transparency and kind of the trust of the community is kind of in this process has taken a hit, has taken a beating. And I think we need to really, really address that, because we are supposed to be maintaining our neighborhood's livability. And that was not a livable situation, because, I mean, many times the RCMP were called out there because of almost accidents. I don't know if there was any actual accidents, but almost accidents. And I stood there and watched bikes going down that section at 60, 65, 70, and they didn't stop at the four-way stop. So it was very, very dangerous. And it's three roads and then sort of a lane that goes up behind. And so you've got a four-way, very busy four-way intersection there. And I think there's something like 15 kids just in those two blocks. So to suddenly have those blocks change from sort of a cul-de-sac, not worry about traffic, to changing to what it was, and the idea that it might change to that permanently, just destroys the livability in that neighborhood as far as I'm concerned. I think if it was put to the neighborhood that it would be returned to the way it was, then it should be returned to the way it was. And having to take fill back out is our responsibility, because we told the neighborhood we would put it back. So I think the costs around having the fill removed, I don't know what they are, but I would suggest that that's something that the district should just deal with if this motion passes. Also, it was mentioned that this would lead to redundancy for mobility, and it would also lead to decreasing redundancy of roads, I think it was. And I don't see any of that happening. It's going to stay there, whether it's number 2 or number 3. And just because one doesn't mention transit doesn't mean that transit wouldn't say, okay, well, it's classified, so now we can put transit on there. I just think we owe it to the community to listen to them, and they have shown us overwhelmingly they want number 1. So I'm in favor of number 1.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Other members of council wish to comment? Councillor Back?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting Councillor Hanson's motion to look at direction 1, which is to revegetate this area. This was built to facilitate the construction, as has been highlighted, of the Gallen Avenue storm sewer replacement project. I think it was entirely necessary, but it was positioned as a temporary measure to facilitate that project. I've spent some time down in the area, went down there in the summertime and was able to visit with some of the residents right along the Naughton Avenue there where the Detour is located. And I did see firsthand how it really has changed the nature of that street, which is a very quiet street, at least prior to the detour being implemented, one that's very family oriented as well. As has been highlighted in some of the comments before me in terms of emergency vehicle access, it's been pointed out that there are other routes in and out of the Deep Cove area. So I don't think this is entirely necessary to have this as an emergency access point. From an active transportation perspective, I'm one of the biggest advocates of active transportation and building out our cycling network across the district. I don't actually see this as offering a significant benefit to people cycling in and out of Deep Cove at this time. I think there's a lot of other active transportation projects that would need to happen before this becomes part of the bigger network. I also think that there may be other routes that might make more sense for active transportation other than this one. So those are some of the key points. And in terms of the process, I won't comment too much on that either. I do think that it was staff's efforts were very well intentioned. It was very thorough. Over 100 pages of comments in the report. I was able to get through it, but there was a lot there, and I do appreciate the time that residents took to respond and offer their thoughts. And I do think it's up to us as council to honor those residents and their view on this. So I will be again supporting the motion on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Your comments?
Thanks, Mayor Little. I'm a bit conflicted about supporting Councillor Hansen's motion. To say right at the front, I don't support the staff recommendation of option 2. I think it's I don't necessarily see the benefit of keeping a partial detour open, and as Councillor Back said, the benefits to active transportation and emergency access aren't necessarily there. But I think there was, I'd say significant support for looking at this as a permanent option from the Deep Cove community. It was 40, let me pull up the numbers again, 40% to 30% ish between the two options. And, I know, I live in the Linmore neighborhood, and I personally know the experience of having a major road introduced into your neighborhood with, the expansion of the highway through Linmore. And so, I kind of viscerally understand the impact that a road where one didn't exist, or a road being expanded or doubled, has in terms of noise, in terms of your perception of what your neighborhood is. But I think that option 1 isn't returning this to what it was. It's revegetating. So in 60 years from now, this area might look like what it did, before the detour went in. 60 years before that, it was a disturbed area, with a gravel road and informal road and access to a number of kind of rural properties along there. And so what residents had become used to before the introduction of the detour changes. And I think the one concern I have is that Deep Cove and the way people use Deep Cove have changed significantly over 60 years. And we've been struggling with the district to address those challenges for at least a decade. And I think that there is the potential here, and I don't think we've necessarily explored it enough, that having this as a permanent transportation link could alleviate a lot of those, or allow us to better manage a lot of those challenges, and not just today, but a decision for the next 20 or 30 or 50 years. Whereas eliminating that option closes off that flexibility that we might have to better address some of the impacts that are being felt in Deep Cove. And so that's my concern. And I can understand that because we haven't fully explored what how Deep Cove might work better, how it might work better, to reduce the demand on parking, to provide a better street escape for people that are walking, the residents that are walking or using the local shops and services, how the people on Gallant Avenue that live there might actually like to have less than half the traffic that they have today as well. There's benefits and costs on each side. But I think that it's, without fully exploring those options, it might be a bit premature to cancel this. So it's a challenging decision. I know that if I lived beside and I had the choice, of course I would say that no road. But I think there is a bigger conversation that we should have. And the road is closed right now. It's going to take 60 years for the trees to grow back. I don't think that decision needs to happen right now. I think we should take more time and think about the challenges that we have in Deep Cove and whether this could be a better option or not.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Murray. You're muted, Councillor. Councillor, you're muted.
Sorry.
No.
Sorry, my video is dying, so that's why I had to turn it off. So this has been a challenging project, and this has been a challenging issue. And I think, Councillor Bond, I'll let you know that I've been trying to deal with traffic and challenges in Deep Cove for 30 years, not 10. And I will say that the solutions are few because it's a dead end. And the destination has gotten very, very popular over the years because of that rock, quarry rock, and a little donut on Gallant Avenue. The world has come. Social media has brought the world to Deep Cove. Social media has brought the world to every tourist destination, 100-fold. And the challenges of managing that kind of traffic in areas such as Deep Cove and Horseshoe Bay and these little areas that access our mountains is very, very, very challenging. I talked about from the beginning of this, and for years, I've said we have to do a traffic study in Deep Cove. And when I say Deep Cove, I mean north of Strathcona at Mount Seymour Parkway. You can access the area. And, when people are just driving around the block, hoping to find a spot, that doesn't create anything livable. Livable Deep Cove, as it's been coined, is challenging for me because there's so many issues in regards to the livability of Deep Cove with the amount of traffic that comes on a sunny day in the summer or just a sunny day period. And we have put little effort into looking at the circulation challenges, the parking challenges for the broader area of Deep Cove, and how we can reduce that. I will tell you, that this is my home. It's been my father's home, my grandmother's home, my great-grandmother's home. And this little connector is not going to solve the problem of traffic in Deep Cove. It's just not. It's congested because there's a four-way stop at Gallant and Panorama, and there's crosswalks on every corner. And there's a lot of people, and I think that was Mr. Joyce spoke to that at the beginning when he talked about the amount of numbers of people that are crossing that intersection, and that's why it's so busy. I feel really pressured to conclude with my time running down, and this is a very big issue, Mayor Little, and I hope you're going to be lenient. I have some questions for staff in regards to why the budget didn't include the removal of the Naughton connector.
Your Worship, Councillor Murray, there is $100,000 currently in the budget.
I know, but if the cost was going to be $500,000 to remove it, why didn't we budget for that?
I'm just going to jump in and say we don't normally budget for things that haven't had a council decision. That's so budgeting for all three options specifically and then waiting for the council decision, that would actually be the unusual situation.
But I guess in the sense of this project, it was a temporary detour to accommodate traffic because we had to do the culvert. And it just seems to me that, we should have put money aside, or it should have been included in the contract to remove it, given that it was temporary. I think there's a whole bunch of things that are attached to it. Lower Gallant, the money that the federal government put up for COVID, that complicated the outcome of this whole issue. The communications process, I mean, on the one hand, it was very good. Certainly the calls that we had online with the community association were some of the best, most well-attended events, pre-COVID or COVID that we've ever had. I've run out of time, so I'll wait, I'll come back. I hope we can give a little bit more time to this, Mayor Little, because I think there's a number of things we need to address, and we haven't really had a good opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you very much. It's up to the council to decide to commit more time. If the council comes up with a clear decision tonight, then that's the council making that decision. I see Mr. Joyce, did you have a comment to follow up?
Just a quick one, Your Worship. It came up a little bit. Had we do it all over again, Council, I categorically would put this detour in to allow Gallant Avenue to occur. There's no way to do Gallant Avenue. That was the best move, was putting the detour in to facilitate the construction of Gallant. That provided that opportunity to have this conversation with Council tonight. That's it. Aaron's done that. A great job at looking at all the different views, presenting them, getting the feedback, working with our communication group and presenting them. And it's to council now to give us that direction of the three concepts, and we'll take that direction.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Joyce. For my own comments on the matter, sorry, Mr. Stewart, did you have a comment as well?
No, just two quick comments. What you've got is a technical recommendation. That's the engineers are saying from their perspective, this is the best recommendation. They don't have to be beat up about that. That's what they're paid to do. Yep. That's what they've done. Okay, I'm sorry. Just let's put that into perspective. And the other thing, if council decides on recommendation number 1, we're fine with that at staff, and we'll find a way to make it happen. Okay. The only question that I've got on that is if we are going to be looking at rehabilitating Deep Cove through the rebuilding of that. I just would suggest that we not remove the detour until after we finish that project, because we might need it for that project as well. I'm just being very practical about that.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Stewart. I think just for my own comments on the matter, I think I wrestled with a lot of the similar issues that Councillor Bond raised about the issue of potentially future-proofing for the area and trying to find ways to anticipate demand for the area. Now, I have no interest in adding density to this area whatsoever. In fact, I was part of the councils that downzoned these properties. There were 13 properties that we downzoned in and around Gallant, and in order to be able to send the message out there that we don't intend to add any densification to this area. Having said that, you don't have to add one single unit to have the traffic go up and respond based on community demand. And our ability to respond, we can either just say, well, tough beans, it's just going to be lined up all the time in and out of the area, or we can sit down and talk about what we could potentially do to improve circulation. And then I'm left with some challenges. People have mentioned a number of the streets that go in and out of there. I've lived in the Seymour area my whole life. I know this area very well. There's no way I'm widening, making permanent, or making public the Deep Cove Crescent connection through the strata. There's no way I'm going to be widening Gallant around that curve and the creek and the culvert that we've just installed. And I really, really have no interest in pumping more traffic past the elementary school through a circuitous route through this neighborhood that is so hard to describe to people in order to be able to wayfind through the community. And so I'm left with a situation where I go, maybe not today, maybe not for the next 20 years, but I think a time is going to come when the district is going to have to use this space to manage traffic in and out of the area. And so I've noticed that the dialogue in the community, and when the public hear the word temporary, they hear there and then gone. And when the municipality says temporary, we mean we're going to build it in an easily removable fashion. We're not going to use finishing concrete. We're not going to do it all up nice and have a proper finished space to it, because we may remove it in the future. And so there was very much a difference in dialogue going on in the community. And I think there's a lesson to be learned there. When we were saying temporary and when they were saying temporary, it was meaning two different things. Nothing nefarious on either side about that. That's just how we describe it. When we're finishing a road to a permanent standard, it is done with proper drainage, proper finishing, concrete. We may use concrete sidewalks. It's done to a permanent standard rather than a temporary standard, which is what you saw there, where dump trucks were just dumping the fill out to build up the space. Further to that, I had some challenges with some of the discourse in the community. We need to be able to have sit down and have rational discussions in our community about these kinds of issues, where we can sit down and just talk about what the impact is going to be and listen, but also be able to talk about the issues. And we had people that were decided that they were going to use some techniques to try to really make people angry against their own municipality. And as you can see here tonight, the council's been listening the whole way along. There was no preconceived decision. There was no drawn out outcome. The staff are making their recommendation based on the conditions that they saw. But we had people, I remember it was back in the Soccer days, a fellow named Rafe Mayer, I remember he would talk about how they used to have a place called Woodlot 79. And Woodlot 79, of course, nobody was going to lie down on a road to protect Woodlot 79. But then he renamed it to, the government accepted the advocates' renaming of it to the Great Bear Rainforest. And once it was renamed the Great Bear Rainforest, all of a sudden there was a lot more interest in it. People were buying into the narrative. People were becoming emotionally attached to it. And then there was a campaign to be able to stop it. And we saw some of the same techniques happening here. Somebody sent me an email talking about how they've always gone to Deep Cove Songbird Park. And I did not know that this person, decided that Naughton Connector, and it was always called the Naughton Connector, was now all of a sudden being rebranded as being Deep Cove Songbird Park. So there were some games being played that distracted away from us being able to have a dialogue and a discourse in the community. And I found that frustrating. I hope the community sees that there hasn't been a preconceived decision on this, that the council was listening, the council came, saw what was going on, and have all presented different views on the matter. For my own comments of my own position on the matter, I kind of fall somewhere between number 1 and number 2. I can see the benefits of revegetating most of it, but having a little bike route down there and taking those bikes, particularly off the sidewalk in the Gallant corridor, makes some sense to me. And I can also see what I think Councillor Vaughan was speaking about, was that concerns of tying our hands for future decision making on being able to improve the circulation in the area. But it looks like the number 1 option is going to win tonight. But I hear Mr. Stewart's comments that as we go through the longer discussion about the Lower Gallant, we may still have to make some decisions about how to access that space. And so we just don't have a lot of options. We cannot send that traffic through those other small streets. If I still have, I've got 25 seconds, I'll throw one more story in it. We had 2 fires during this time, and I was down there during those fires. My house is right by the fire hall. When the whole place empties out, sometimes I go down and check out what's going on. And the problem is the water service is on the north side of the road. And so in each of those instances, the road was blocked because the hose is sent out across to the other corner over at Gallant and Panorama. And so it wasn't just emergency access to get fire trucks in there, it was emergency access to turn around about 400 cars over the next hour. Do you want to do that through the strata? Do you want to do that past the elementary school? That's what we talk about when we talk about emergency access. It's not just that. Anyway, having said all of that, I hope you see that we've considered the matter on all sides and taken the comments from the community seriously. I probably would have landed between number 1 and number 2, and also said that we have to be aware of what the future concerns are. But Councillor Hanson's motion is the one that's on the floor. Councillor Murray, your comments?
Well, I've always maintained the position that I thought a pedestrian path through the area was something supportable. And I started off at the beginning agreeing with a bike connector until I stood down at the intersection at the foot of Naughton and watched the bikes fly down and not stop. And so that became a very dangerous, challenging issue. And so, I believed that there had to be some, infrastructure put in to force cyclists to dismount and then walk their bikes down, and then, even a speed bump to slow them down, because they were literally electric bikes and regular cyclists were just flying down that chute, to get to the bottom and then go back up Gallant. I'm concerned that there's this thinking that we think this connector is the solution to circulation problems, and that we're never going to be able to do anything with that lower Gallant. Do what with it? Open it up? It was opened up for years. Every single year summer for Deep Cove Days, we used that lower road. And in 20 years ago, Deep Cove, or 30 years ago, Deep Cove Days was on Gallant. It wasn't in the park. It was always on the road. And the bus always came up. The cars detoured through Strathcona, Cliffmont. And the bus, we just moved the hay bales every 30 minutes when the bus came up, and we were able to utilize lower Gallant. So this idea that there's a needing a road in Deep Cove to create better circulation, I just don't see that. I mean, I understand the concept of, emergency vehicles, but we haven't had any need for that to date, because we have Cliffmont, Strathcona, and we do have that service road through the strata. I know that that's not perfect, but as we know, with emergency services and first responders, they go where they need to go, and they get to where they need to get to. So I think the community, and I am even not sure about really what the end game on this is about. I wanted to be able to replant, revegetate. I know that in Councillor Hanson's opening remarks, the talk of the removing of the fill, how that's going to work. Or maybe, as Mayor Little, you're pointing out, maybe there is a room for somewhere between 1 and 2 where there is that pedestrian connection that remains. Before it was a significant drop, and it was a scurry through a bush, over from the driveway that accesses the strata into that area. But if there was a way to allow a pedestrian connection, I think that would be a good service to the community. And I really do think that we need to put some effort into looking at the circulation of the entire area north of the Parkway, north of Strathcona, and how we are going to try to look at active transportation seriously, because to date, I don't know, other than the pandemic and closing Quarry Rock, what we've done to be able to deal with the onslaught of traffic lining up along Deep Cove Road, trying to get to the Cove. We've done nothing. We talk about it. I ask questions about it all the time to staff and council, and raise it constantly, and nothing ever happens. We had all of this time to try to address that issue, and we are looking at adding yet another attraction to the Cove. And I just don't think that that's going to make it better. I think that that's going to make it more challenging. I think the community, was supportive of some sort of connection. I think the majority of the community was supportive of some sort of a pedestrian connection in there. But I just worry that, based on some of the comments tonight, that it's more than that. And this is seen as some sort of a solution to a problem. And I just don't agree with that. And I think if that's the case, then the connection of lower Gallant, the circulation in the Cove, and this connection all has to be looked at as one whole project instead of breaking it up into these little pieces and trying to address them individually, because I think that's what's created the problem.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, I just would like to say that I know we've looked at the parking in Deep Cove a few times and tried to figure out what to do about that. It's obviously most severe in the summer months or in fall. But making Naughton any kind of a vehicle road is only going to add to that problem, because we haven't solved the parking problem. And so I would, again, think that we should look at, there are many factors in a tiny little dead end space that's becoming more and more popular. And we can't just jump from one thing to the next. We need to take it in steps, analyze it, look at it. And if we can make more room for parking, then we start thinking about a different access to the parking, wherever the parking is located. Not jump right now that we have to make this road, because it may not be the best place for it. And my only other comment would be that, it's drastically, it's not just a little, and it's not just mobility. It's, having a green space outside your door to go to, or an elderly person take their dog outside to a little bit of green space, or the shade, it may take 60 years to get back to where it was if it stays the way we're talking about it at the moment. But the district can certainly, I don't kind of buy into that comment that we're setting ourselves up for failure because that means we can't do it in the future. As long as you consult with the neighborhood and you truly listen to the neighborhood. And if that's what the neighbors at that time want in 10 years, 15, 20 years, then that's what they'll get. So I don't think we're cutting our nose off to spite ourselves, but I think we owe it maybe it was miscommunication. If it is, I would have miscommunicated with the district on the same way that some of the neighbors there have, because temporary to me means it's not going to stay. It's going to go back to where it was. So, I think we need to look at the whole picture of Deep Cove and try and look at that. And I think the old road is going to get busier and busier and busier as the Tsleil-Waututh development, if it happens. When that happens, it's going to increase tremendously the amount of people that are there. So it is going to get worse, and we need to look at the whole situation. The mobility, the emergency access, and parking, all is one big thing. That would be my comment about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Stewart, your hand is up. Is that from before?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Murray,
could I just ask a question? I just because we're trying to figure this out, and I know that this is very challenging. On Seymour Boulevard, between the Superstore and Seymour Boulevard, next to the Squamish Nation, there is a little connection for emergency access vehicles with 2 bollards that is opened when a tree comes down or the road floods. And it is a little paved pathway with a berm on either side, and emergency vehicles can get down there, including our own utility trucks and fire can get down that path. It is nowhere near the width of this road on Naughton. And so the suggestion that we have to widen in order to accommodate an emergency vehicle, I just think is not fair when we have access points already that are quite narrow and they work when they're needed. I don't want to deprive the community of emergency access, and I would think that this access would be needed if something catastrophic happened between Caledonia and Panorama. But it's this idea that we have to leave this road and even widen it to accommodate a pathway, cycling, and emergency vehicles when we have other areas in the district that are nowhere near this.
Councillor,
So I would hope
to be fair to the council, you know, this doesn't, and you can still provide comments back to staff. You can still have ideas for the future of this space. We still will have the discussion about Lower Gallant, but I think in fairness, it's time to call the question on the matter. Ms. Moxon, did you have a clarifying comment? I'm ready to call the question if it's not urgent.
Yes, I just want you, through your worship, just to respond quickly. Just for clarification, direction number 2 would not require any widening at all. We would envision is that we would probably revegetate right up to the sides of the pavement. The concrete barriers would be removed. We could probably even, depending on what width we want, we might even be able to tighten up and narrow the asphalt strip a little bit. So no, there wouldn't be any widening for that active transportation link.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, well, it's been moved and seconded. We've had a good discussion around the council table.
I think Councillor Bond has his hand up.
Sorry, Councillor Bond, your comment?
Yeah, maybe just a final comment based on discussion. I think we have had a good discussion, and as you said, Mayor Little, it's been a nuanced discussion. You know, I do think that council has the time, should they wish, to engage in this further and come to a decision. You know, I think the option of revegetating will always be there. That's something we can always do. The road is currently, or the detour is currently closed. Might need more I think just based on discussion tonight, there are other options that we haven't explored that may or may not require this road in its current form, in an expanded form, in a different form. And I think making the decision to remove it now is premature, and it precludes a lot of those options. Doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, once we have those discussions that we can come back in a year or two, council can come back and say, well, you know what, we've explored the other options for circulation and making Deep Cove, you know, more livable, or, you know, helping to resolve some of the traffic and parking issues to the benefit of both residents and visitors. But I think making this decision now might preclude some of those options. We don't know what they are yet, but they will be precluded by this decision. So I think we have time. We don't necessarily have to resolve to return it right now.
Yeah, thank you,
We have
Councillor Forbes, you're speaking for a second time. Go ahead. Oh, you've already spoken for your second time. You've already done full 6 minutes. Okay.
So as another councillor, can I just add one thing?
Yeah, Councillor, is it absolutely essential for the decision today?
Yes, I think people have to consider that those residents have already gone through 2 years of this. So to leave it hanging is not fair to them. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to call the question on the motion, and the motion, to be clear, is unequivocal that this is that the Naughton Avenue Detour community engagement results be received for information, and that that staff, well, the direction 1 put it back the way it was before, although I'm sure we can wordsmith
Your worship, I have that. Clause 1, I'll just pull this up. Clause 1 remains unchanged, which is essentially to receive the report of the section manager for information. Clause 2 is, and that staff are directed to implement direction number 1, revegetation, as detailed in the February 16th report of that section manager.
So it's not what's up on here. It's
substitute direction number 2 after transportation for direction number 1.
So that reflects your motion. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, council, but to be clear though, that this sets in motion the removal, and now obviously it will have to go through a funding discussion. Mr. Stewart, I see your hand, but you know, I know a couple of people had said we can do one and possibly some other down the road. This is going to be directing staff to do number 1. Mr. Stewart, your comment.
Yeah, your worship, and I want to be very respectful with council direction. We will not, if council votes on number 1, we will not be doing number 1 until we have a discussion around the rehabilitation of Deep Cove and what that involves and whether we still need to maintain this access during that reconstruction for a more livable cove. Again, I'm not being disrespectful. I'm just being realistic about the fact that if we go back in there and we have to do major construction on Gallant as part of this rehabilitation, we probably need to do that. So I'm just being very upfront with council about that. I mean, after that, we would do that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? We have a 3-3 vote, okay, and a tie goes to defeat. What I'm going to recommend is that this item be referred to a workshop for further discussion, and then the council can put forward a new recommendation at that time. Is that in order, Mr. Clerk? Okay, and so I've moved that the matter be referred to a workshop, the earliest reasonable time. I have seconder, Councillor Bond. I'm going to call the question on the matter. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. So the matter will continue on for further discussion at this point, which I think matches up with pretty much either scenario anyway, because it was an unfunded item. But I do want to express appreciation to the members of the public who shared their views along the way. I think you see that it was a complicated discussion and decision for all of us, in part because we care so deeply for that space in our community. Which makes it very challenging for us to be able to make broad consensus, but potential changes to the space. So at this point, it will show up on the public agenda again as a workshop, and then hopefully the council will be able to reach consensus around a variant of the options.
Can we have a date for the workshop?
We're going to have to look at the calendar, but I think you have a workshop at the tail end of March. I don't know if there's enough space and time in that one.
Well, I think we have to make space.
We're going to have to sit down with staff and talk about when we can return different options to council for a workshop, but that's that.
We've got some availability in March and April, your worship, so we'll work that out.
Yeah, we do have some workshop time planned in there, but thank you. This happens from time to time where we're not able to reach a consensus, and so we work on the matter, make some changes until we're able to reach a consensus. Thank you very much, council. Thank you very much to members of the public. The next item up for discussion is item 8.6. This is the updated Code of Ethics discussion. Mr. Stewart, opening comments from you.
So, your worship, one of the many recommendations from the Lucadell's report was that we review the Code of Ethics. What we've done is we've taken a look at some of the work that's been done by the Local Government Management Association, as well as the Union of BC Municipalities. We've incorporated some of those. I have had some other suggestions from council, and my suggestion is that unless council has some particular issues with respect to what's being recommended, that we endorse the recommendation and refer any further discussion to a workshop, in which case we can explore the other options that council have suggested. That's all I've got to say at this point, your worship.
Good introduction, Mr. Stewart, but I'm gonna, Councillor Kern has rejoined us. Good, I was gonna call a recess to get Councillor Kern back on. She is on the matter now. Okay, thank you very much. My own comments on the matter, yes, I think it's essential from time to time to be updating these code of ethics and codes of conduct. One of the great things that municipalities do very well is we copy the best practices of other municipalities, and we share the best practices amongst. And so from time to time, you're going to get to see what other municipalities do to address these kinds of issues. I hope that we can be a leading municipality that other municipalities have to look to when they go to update their practices on this matter. And so I'm very optimistic about the potential for that. And one thing I wanted to comment though about this, that I think the language leaves a little to be desired, is that gifts, benefits, and contributions are used interchangeably in a couple of different ways in the that I think sometimes cause confusion. in the ethics and benefits, the ethics piece. Specifically, I think it leaves people with the impression that council members are okay to accept personal gifts and benefits, and that is not the case. There are sometimes matters of protocol, let's say a small piece of artwork or some thank you for coming to an event. And those matters, if they exceed a certain value, need to be fully declared. But sometimes you'll get a pin, like the Legion comes and delivers a poppy and a pin. That obviously would not meet that threshold. But if it was something more significant, it might. But what we have to be cautious about is making it look as though council members are allowed to accept gifts. Not here, not in the province of BC. In Ontario, they actually are permitted to accept gifts up to a certain amount of money, and sometimes they're fairly significant amounts. They have to be disclosed, but they can accept hockey tickets and go to events and activities all funded by private entities. That is not the case in the province of BC. And so I wanted to be clear about that, because some of the ways you could read this could give the impression that councillors can accept gifts so long as they're disclosed. No, in the vast majority of cases, you'll come to the clerk and the clerk will turn around and tell you, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to accept that gift. And just wanted to put that clarification out there, because it was one of the things I was thinking about as I was going through all of this. Councillor Hanson, your comments.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking everyone involved in the process of updating these code of ethics. This is part of a long process that included both the Lou Cadellis report, my motion concerning campaign finance report, and other inputs along the way. I support the amendments made to the Code of Ethics, and I believe this draft is a reasonable document and sets out reasonable provisions. I would comment that ethics, for the most part, is a statement of common sense. The principles set out in this Code of Ethics are general, reasonable, and in my view, appropriately described and contain appropriate detail. As for 9.4, the provision of which arises out of my campaign finance motion, this addresses the issue of campaign contributions from developers, and it now mandates that if a councillor has received a campaign finance donation in excess of $250, they must declare this before voting on any rezoning that would benefit the developer financially. In my view, this is progress. This will at least bring transparency, and I believe this to be a step forward for the district. I would have preferred a provision whereby there was a requirement for reclusal. However, my understanding is that that would not be legally enforceable or constitutional, and at least as in the law as it prevails in British Columbia at this time. So this is perhaps as far as we can go and as much as we can get in this direction in order to achieve the goals that we seek. I would comment that I would welcome legislative amendment at the provincial level specifying exactly the consequences of receiving campaign finance contributions. I would also have preferred a lower contribution limit. There are many campaign finance contributions of less than $250. And we're talking here about individual donations that are affiliated with developers. Sometimes these are given in bundles. And perhaps at an upcoming workshop, we can talk about that $250 limit, how it was arrived at, and if it wouldn't be better at a lower number. I'd also like to speak just briefly about the use of cell phones and the posting of social media during meetings. I don't have any concern as to what any councillors may say in their social media posts, and they're obviously free to make whatever comments they feel appropriate about the affairs of the district and the conduct of different councillors and their positions. But I think it would be better if that was done before and after council meetings. It seems to me that part of our respect to one another is showing up at a meeting, making submissions, making comments and arguments, paying attention, and somehow to be distracting that process by effectively maintaining a second social media meeting while our meeting at the council table is underway, I believe to be we could improve upon that in my view. And I recognize the challenges of enforceability of such a provision, but it could be a statement of intent of this group in my view. So perhaps that's another thing we could talk about in an upcoming workshop. I'll just use my additional time. But again, we'd like to thank everyone involved. And I do believe this is progress for the district. And I support the updated code of ethics and as presented in this report. Thank you very much.
Councillor, just to clarify, will you be moving the motion as recommended?
I will.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder on that matter? Okay, I'm happy to second. Okay, and Councillor Bond, your comments.
Thanks, Mayor Little. Maybe I read the proposed changes to the code of ethics in a different way than others, but under the I think a significant number of Section 8 and Section 9 are actually straight out of the community charter, out of the rules in the community charter. Would that be correct? Maybe we can ask a comment from staff for that.
Okay, Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, yes, Your Worship. I mean, what we tried to do in modernizing it is just reflect the current state of the legislation as we know it and the current state of the law as we know it.
And so that $250 limit that Councillor Hanson mentioned, and it was mentioned during the public comment, that actually applies specifically to gifts and personal benefits as are mentioned in section 9.2 and in the community charter. If council has the total value of the gift exceeds $250, then it has to be disclosed, and those all have to be done in compliance with community charters. Is that correct?
Yeah, Your Worship, there's a subtle difference there. It has to be declared, but not necessarily disclosed. And I think what we're trying to, what I was trying to do with the suggestions to the change of the policy is try to use the same threshold that the community charter does. So if you're required to declare that, and declare that to the clerk or declare that to whoever, we're just suggesting, and again, we can't require this under the current law right now. We're just suggesting that council may want to use that as a threshold for disclosing before a matter is considered that they've received that kind of a benefit or gift.
Yeah, I just think that it doesn't actually read that way in the code of ethics. Section 9.3 refers to section 9.1A, which is straight out of the community charter if you receive an incidental gift more than $250, whereas section 9.4, which is about any funding from any individual, company, group, or association, that being declared. So it doesn't, from the way it's read, there doesn't seem to be any limit on the declaration of funding, and it doesn't necessarily seem to be specific to an application, right?
Yeah, Your Worship, just to respond to that, I was trying to be quite general with respect to how we would look at this, because Councillor Hanson's motion was just about campaign contributions. But the point of the matter is, I was trying to draw back into the charter and just basically saying, if you have a matter that's before you that you're going to be making a decision that's conferring a benefit on somebody, then you need to, and again, it's only recommended, it can't be required. It's only recommended that you disclose that. And council could choose, a council member could choose not to disclose that. The mayor has commented at the very beginning of the conversation. I mean, the law is pretty wide open right now. But we're trying to, in the code of ethics, create a sort of a culture that says, you know what, if I got money from somebody and there's a matter before me that benefits them, I should at least disclose that. Not necessarily recuse yourself, because there's no legal obligation to recuse yourself, but in the interest of transparency, that you would say, you know what, I got a campaign contribution, or I got this kind of gift or whatever. I know it may or may not, be above the community charter threshold, but to give council and any committee members an opportunity to say, I've received this in the interest of transparency, but I still can participate in the discussion and the vote. That's
and I think your explanation there is a lot clearer than what is written in 9.4.
Yeah, I know.
And I think I think we're not going to wordsmith stuff right now. I know we're a little if we want to wordsmith stuff, but I think in all fairness to the motion that Councillor Hanson brought forward, I think the clarity around specifically in 9.4 about a member of council receiving a campaign contribution from an individual or business and the interests of that individual and business being before council and a declaration carrying at that point, I think that could be made clear in the Code of Ethics, because 9.4 doesn't read that way to me, and I think if that's the intent of council, that if members receive contributions, campaign contributions specifically, because we can't legally receive any other type of contribution from an individual, and if that person or business has a matter before council, that councillors should disclose that contribution. I think there's probably a better way to say that and meet the intent of Councillor Hanson's motion, and should that be the will of council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bond. Any other speakers on the matter? I found that it had some similar challenges, particularly 9.3 when it refers to section 9.1A. It doesn't again say that that's an external document. So just minor wordsmithing, things like that. Like it should say 9.1A of the community charter, because if you look back at 9.1A or 9.1, just a couple of points before, there's no 9.1A. Was it removed? Was it there? But also on specifically 9.4, gifts, personal benefits in excess of $250. I don't know that is actually an additional level of scrutiny. I think that you already had to have declared and disclosed a gift in excess of $250. Is that not accurate, Mr. Clark?
Can you restate that question, Your Worship?
Well, I'm just wondering, I think the impression people have is that 9.4 is adding an additional level of scrutiny, but I believe people already had the requirement to both declare and disclose gifts in excess of $250. And I think the corporation's position normally would be that the item would be taken from the individual and that person would not end up with that item.
Yeah, Your Worship, just to remove any confusion, when you receive the gift of over $250, irrespective of whether it's a matter before council, you have to declare it.
Yes.
That's very different than a situation where you're saying, no, there's a connection here between not only the gift that I received, but what I'm having to deal with, and the matters before council. So you could have no matter before council, and you would still have an obligation to declare that gift or contribution. This is trying to tie into when you're actually considering an issue for which you're providing a benefit to somebody, and you've received some kind of gift or contribution. You need to, and we're recommending, because we can't require it, we're recommending that before that matter is considered at council, likely it would be at the time that the matter is considered, you would stand up and say, I've received this gift. That doesn't require that you be recused, but it allows you to at least have that opportunity to say, I received that gift or that contribution, but I'm still going to consider the matter before council. There's a subtle difference there. I'm sorry, but that's the best way I can.
That's fine. But then I go back to my original comment that there is a equivocation of gifts, benefits, and contributions. And I think probably important to make the distinction between legally declared contributions and a gift that may be inconsequential. We shouldn't be ending up with a gift worth $250, but we're putting it in the code of ethics that in a way that makes it look like it's legitimate to receive $250 so long as you stand up in the meeting and before a decision is made. No, it is not legitimate for you to receive a $250 gift from somebody. So that's the confusion that I'm going after, is that I'm quite certain I've had the instance where a developer has tried to give a bottle of alcohol at Christmas time. And just out of curiosity, I asked the clerk what his position is, and the position is, well, you wouldn't get to keep it. No, I wasn't going to anyway. We all take all of those things and we use them as a United Way initiative to raise funds at Christmas time. I'm happy to contribute it over that way. That's what we do with it, because it would be inappropriate to receive it. This actually gives you the impression that it is legal and legitimate to receive a gift in excess of $250. The way it's written. And so that'd be my concern, is that it leaves the question mark out there as to whether there's a legal way for you to get significant gifts from developers so long as you're not voting on their matters.
So, and your worship, I made these comments at the very beginning. If we want to get into all the pluses and minuses and wordsmithing of it, this is probably better referred to a workshop, and we can finalize the wording to something that council is comfortable with, and then bring it back.
Well, I'm going to keep continuing on. Councillor Muri, your comments?
I agree with your perspective in regards to this issue. It does, I don't think we need to go through a workshop to figure this out. I think we just have to be clear that councillors or any member of council should not be receiving any gifts at all. And is it only, it does also suggest, just to take it one step further, that you're going to have to stand up and say it if it affects you during a council meeting because you received something of $250 and all of a sudden there's an issue on the table for us to discuss. So I think 9.3 and 9.4 need to go back to Mr. Stewart to clarify and to rewrite that so it doesn't sound like we're suggesting that a gift of $250 is reasonable, because it's not. And then the rest of it, the rest of it is all good. We've had these discussions about code of ethics over the years. We've had different workshops about code of ethics. We've had councils who have gone through, teams to come in and try to get us to work at getting along better, because we've certainly had those challenges over the years. And I find that what happens is, we have a workshop with council, we have something written down, and then it's really never referred to. I think Councillor Hansen over the years in regards to campaign donations has, regularly brought up that issue. And because it's an important one to be able to declare that, I think, and that's why I agreed with the motion that he brought forward. I agree with the code of ethics, the way that they've been laid out, but I think those 9.3 and 9.4 needs a bit more work, Mr. Stewart, and I don't think it needs a whole workshop to fix it.
Yeah, Your Worship, I have to be really clear here. Whether you make a contribution of $250 or the 1,000, whatever it is, that's the ceiling for contributions from folks, the courts have made it very clear that those are not conflicts of interest. You can get a contribution of $750 or $1,000, and you can vote on a matter, and it is not a conflict of interest. So I was just trying to use the 250, which is the declaration threshold. I'm not trying to be more complicated than that, because the reality is, unless you have a contribution that exceeds the threshold in the charter, okay, you get to vote. And whether it's a developer or whether it's whatever. And I was just trying to follow through with the spirit of Councillor Hansen's motion, but certainly whether we do a workshop or not, certainly I will listen to what council has to say, and trying to come back with something that works. But I'm just trying to be really clear here that the charter is really clear on the $250 threshold in terms of declaration. And the fact of the matter is, until you get to the maximum contribution allowed under the charter, there's no conflict of interest. You don't have to declare anything. You don't have to do anything. You can just go through the process. Just being really honest here. So
yeah, and I think we're on the same page, Mr. Stewart. With one exception, is that I think we're still conflating the issue of legal disclosed contributions as a part of a campaign and what could other matters that could be considered a gift, because that is clearly not a gift. And so if somebody walks up to a politician and hands them $500, which part of this code of ethics kicks in, right? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a legal disclosed political contribution. I'm talking about the ugly side, the graft of situation where somebody is actually accepting contributions, because that needs to be contemplated in there. And so I guess my last point that I would make on that is that if we have a discussion at a workshop of some kind, I really would like to have the clerk a part of that. The clerk and the deputy clerk, they're the ones who have to police the policy. And so I really would like their comments on how they're going to communicate the policy and what the expectation would be, because I think that just the way this is written right now, it still leaves the impression that people can accept significant contributions, and so long as not political contributions, I mean gifts and benefits, as it's declared in here, which is not legal disclosed contributions, that they have a path forward to that they can actually accept it and move forward as long as they declare it in the proper way, and that is not the case. Again, you're absolutely right. This is exactly the trap I talked about, is that we're going to end up wordsmithing the code of ethics in a public meeting, which just doesn't have the same appeal. It's something we definitely should be talking about with a set aside time.
Yeah, and if we have a workshop, it doesn't have to be a workshop devoted entirely to this. It could be half an hour. I'll take the comments and then we'll try to clean them up. Leave it at that.
No, but I really do appreciate the work you've done putting this together. It's a complicated area that crosses philosophy, ethics, and then the law. So it is complicated. Councillor Bond, your comments.
Yeah, and I think we've gotten into the place that you mentioned at the beginning of the item, where we're tending to mix bribes, which you just mentioned, which are illegal, gifts, which a councillor cannot receive except as a matter of protocol. And if you read the legislation, and I'm sure the clerk could reiterate this, you can receive a $250 gift as a matter of protocol. Attend a ceremony with a foreign government and they offer you not that we do that, but I'm trying to think of, or a neighboring government, say a neighboring municipality, and they buy you dinner. You can technically accept that. And if the number of dinners that you attend with neighboring municipalities totals more than $250 during a calendar year, then that must be declared by law. And you must itemize what the nature of those gifts and benefits are, who it's from. That's the legislation. But what we're talking about here, that's the first points. And I think where we're getting mixed up is that there are legal requirements that we have around things that are illegal, around gifts and what type of gifts a council can receive. And I don't actually remember receiving a tie from First Nation when we go to a First Nation ceremony, technically a gift, right? We can receive those as a matter of protocol. And what the intent of Councillor Hanson's motion is that if you receive a campaign contribution and the person that gave you that contribution has a matter of benefit before council, that campaign contribution should be disclosed. And that's definitely not clear. So I think we need to tighten up the language on that.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Kern.
Thanks. I just wondered, and I guess I know we're not wordsmithing, and so this is probably going to go to a workshop. That was very ambitious of someone to think it could be 30 minutes, but I just had some questions about incorporating some of the work that we had done around the Coalition of Inclusive Municipality, which sort of addresses more of systemic issues that challenges us to do what we said we would do when we joined the Coalition of Inclusive Municipality, the TRC. Like, I think that when you talk about ethics and you don't have an acknowledgement of structural power imbalances and bias, then I think that we could inadvertently be not being as inclusive or ethical. I mean, we could debate what that language means, but it seems like that's a better place for that type of conversation to happen as in a workshop format. But I just wondered if staff could comment on if they see a place for any of the work that we did around the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities or the TRC implementation.
Yeah, Your Worship, quite simply, I tried to address some of the weaknesses in the policy as compared to best practices and the Lucadell's report. Certainly, we didn't expand the consideration with respect to other things, and that is really better fitted for a workshop, and I would be more than comfortable in referring this matter to a workshop based on the conversation that I've heard tonight. I think that would be helpful. It's not necessarily in any way, shape, or form saying that what's on the table is not appropriate, but I'm hearing that it needs some clarification and that it may or may not need some expansion. And that's probably likely the best place to do that is in a workshop. And we can do that fairly soon. This is one of the things arising from the Lucadell's report that I would really like to tick off this spring to get those done. So I would look forward to that opportunity to have that broader discussion.
Mr. Stewart, thank you, Councillor Curran. Further speakers on the matter, but I think the intent is to refer the matter to a workshop. And so I'm moving deferral. I have low blood sugars. I really shouldn't be. Are you willing to, yes, okay, so Councillor Hansen has indicated that. I'm the seconder on the motion, and so we intend to back the item up and make it a referral motion to a workshop, and that's satisfactory to the clerk?
That is, Your Worship, yes. We'll do away with the motion as made that was to approve the CAO's report and substitute referral to a workshop instead.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Council, I think I'm ready to call a question on that motion. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Council. And our time is marching on. We have item 8.9 here. I think before we get into the meat of 8.9, I'm going to request that Council make a motion that we extend the meeting to 11 o'clock. Is there a seconder on that matter? Seconded by Councillor Bond. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay, Council. Now we have the item 8.9. This is opposing Roberts Bank Terminal 2 expansion. Councillor Curran, it's your report. So would you like to make a motion and start off discussion, please?
Yeah, I'd like to move my recommendation.
Okay. Is there a seconder on the matter? I'm willing to second the matter for discussion. Councillor Curran, your comments.
Thank you, Mayor Little. There are scientists in our community and outside of our community who wrote a letter in support of the other scientists who had supported who had expressed concerns that are outlined in the report, which of course I can't find now because my laptop died. Now I'm trying to work on another device. But the scientists are saying that this will cause irreparable harm we are in a climate and ecological emergency. I wondered if the speaker from the Port of Vancouver who spoke had actually read the IPCC report that came out today, because what it's calling for is system-wide transformation. And the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services has for a long time known that when you try to transform systems, that you will of course get pushback from the status quo. A quote from their report last summer: the member states of the IPBES plenary have now acknowledged that by its very nature, transformative change can expect opposition from those with interests in the status quo, but also that such opposition can be overcome for the broader good. And we share an atmosphere. If everyone takes a breath right now, that's because of this magical biosphere that we have that is at great risk. We have numerous species that are at risk of extinction. 84% of the species at risk. The main reason for their decline is loss of habitat. So I guess I can go over lots and lots of scientific reason. It's all there in the report. But really this comes down to, when is enough enough? And what is being asked here is to write a letter. There will be no point in history where I think, gosh, I shouldn't have sent a letter to stand up for all of those other species, as well as our own, that are at risk of great harm from this expansion. This is the status quo. This myth of sustainability in a degenerative system has to stop. What are we sustaining? You can't sustain extinction. You can't sustain ecosystem collapse. You can't sustain hurricanes, floods. We are in a point of great decline, and we need to be regenerating systems. So I stand with the scientists and the animals and the ecosystems that will be harmed by this expansion. This idea of growth is incompatible with life on Earth, both in the short term and the long term. So sending a letter in a position that I have now, asking council to send one letter to 3 people is a minimal amount of time. And it's just something that I think there'll be no point in history that we don't look back on and think, did we do everything that we could when we could? And so I hope that council will support this. If they don't, these don't always go our way. We have a long road ahead of us, but we have to imagine a radically different future if we are going to do what scientists tell us that we need to do, and hopefully what morality tells us that we have to do as well. We are running out of time to act. The IPCC report today makes that very, very clear. And we need to change everything, not just change, I guess, transform, and imagine a beautiful new future, and this is not part of it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I seconded the matter mostly for discussion. I'm actually a supporter of the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 facility. The federal government has given a mandate to increase trade in our country and has made it the priority, as expressed earlier by the Port Metro Vancouver representative, that this includes and is specifically focused on intermodal trade through the Pacific Rim region. And there's a very good reason for it. The population in the world is going up dramatically, and what we're shipping out of the Port of Vancouver in particular is agriculture, agri-food products, and primary resource materials, quite often like the lumber industry. And I used to work in the lumber industry and ship intermodally. But I make no benefit from it now. But, you know, if we decide that we're not going to provide potash and sulfur and grain and wood to those other regions, their quality of life will suffer dramatically. And these are developing economies. And so it's a very difficult situation to say that trade is bad, because it's not. It improves the quality of life for so many people. It also is an important part of our economy. This intermodal capability provides much more direct access to so many more places in the world. And so I'm a supporter of trade. I'm a supporter of Canada's place in the world in terms of global trade. And we benefit greatly from it as a lower mainland where it's generally easy to find products because they empty the container with one product and then they put it full of grain and lumber and agri-food pieces, and then they send it over to China, Korea, Japan, India, Pakistan, whoever is looking for those products. And so it's important for us to have the capacity. The federal government has already identified that both our rail network and our port terminal facilities have to be increased to represent that increased trade. And it won't stop with this. If not Terminal 2, then what? This place has already been fairly environmentally disturbed. Acknowledge that there's a lot of work that's been going on to improve the estuary space out of the Fraser River. But if you're going to put something that is ecologically disturbing anywhere, you want to consolidate it so that you impact fewer areas. And so this place already has the rail line to it. The federal government's already been working on off-grading the rail line to and from this space so that they can get it through the lower mainland without interruption and without impacting the neighborhoods along the way. So it makes absolute sense that the Delta Superport is where these products moving through would have the lowest impact. If you ship them out of other ports that don't already have that infrastructure, you're going to be creating an even bigger impact. So I'm not a supporter of this. I will say that I think all members of council have a mandate, and they have the ability to be advocates and raise their concerns. And those concerns, sometimes it's a letter, sometimes it's more active. I completely endorse Councillor Curran's right to raise these issues and support that, even though it may not be a core capacity of the municipality. But in this case, I just happen to disagree with the content, and so I'll be voting against the letter. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll also be voting against this particular motion. I certainly respect the spirit of the motion, and I respect Councillor Curran's intentions in bringing the motion. And I acknowledge that the Roberts Bank terminal expansion is likely to involve environmental harms. My challenge, however, is that in this case, we're dealing with access to container ports. This is a federal issue involving significant competing economic, environmental, and even geopolitical considerations, as was discussed by Mayor Little. Given that we're not going to see the end of containers, in my view, the discussion then becomes, if not here, where? If not at Roberts Bank, will in fact more traffic be forced into the Burrard Inlet, causing ever increasing volumes, and will in fact the consequence of not developing Roberts Bank be environmental harm to our district shoreline and to Burrard Inlet. The Vancouver Port Authority claimed that the expansion will bring over 17,000 operational jobs, adding $3 billion to our gross national product and $600 million in government taxes. How is that benefit to be weighed and assessed against the other environmental harms, the local environmental harms, which I don't underestimate in any way? I simply say that I don't have the kind of expertise, nor do I have the kind of authority to weigh in on a motion of this complexity. And as I say, while I respect the spirit of the motion, I believe that the issues at stake to be so complicated that I'm not prepared to conclude at this time that opposition to Roberts Bank Terminal is in fact in the best interest of the district. Thank you very much.
Apologies, Councillor Bond, please.
Thanks, Mayor Little. I'm having a bit of deja vu here. It's quite, it's interesting to hear your comments, Mayor Little, and your comments, Councillor Hanson, emphasizing the benefits or potential benefits of this major project. And I know Councillor Kern's report outlines a lot of the ecological harms that will be caused, at least in the expert opinion of a panel of scientists that have studied this issue in depth. That will be caused by this. But I know there's another project that's slightly more local that had similar arguments for and against. Arguments about geopolitical considerations, national interests, the realm of the federal government in terms of responsibility of determining it, weighing against local environmental risks and perceived local environmental risks. And that is the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And I remember that council of the day, well, there's three of us left that were on that council, voted unanimously to do something similar, to write a letter opposing the completion of that pipeline, specifically because of risks of environmental harm. And, you know, while we recognize potential benefits of these types of major infrastructure projects, national infrastructure projects, at that time, council at least decided to vote unanimously in favor of local environmental interests. And I think that, you know, we have a very unique in that project and in the district, we have a very unique natural ecosystem in the Maplewood mudflat area that in our consideration at that time, the project, the Trans Mountain Pipeline project proposed or brought about unacceptable amount of potential risk to that area. And I would argue that the Boundary Bay and that area of and Mud Bay and that entire area of Delta and Ladner is far larger and far more environmentally has far more environmental capacity for species at risk, marine and aquatic life than the mudflats do, simply because of size and its position in the region. And so, you know, if council, you know, there's only three of us that were there now, so it's not, maybe it's not the best argument, but if council was willing to put aside, you know, national geopolitical economic arguments at that point in time and vote in favor of local environmental interests, then I think this is it's a good enough reason to vote in favor of this time. And, you know, realistically, it's a letter. I think what best could happen and be a result of this letter is that the federal government and the you know, the Port Authority feel a little bit more pressure to do a better job at what they're doing. I think that's probably what the outcome of letters or other municipalities and entities opposing their opposition to this project would do. And so for that purpose, I think that a letter is appropriate. And you know, if it doesn't stop the project, then at least it will force the people that do have to make the decision and do have the authority to make the decision to do as best as they can.
Thank you very much. Councillor Muri, your comments?
Thank you, Mayor Little. And I was happy to oppose the Trans Mountain Pipeline because the risks to the inlet are too great, and I continue to oppose it. I will support the motion to write a letter. I'm in receipt of a letter by Dr. Ken Ashley. He's a resident of North Vancouver, one of our local community's fishy friends. He's also the directors of the BC Rivers Institute and a PhD. And he submitted a letter to me just over a week ago in which no less than 26 PhD scientists of varying universities across the country, some former members of the Ministry of Fisheries and Oceans have signed in regards to the detrimental effects of this project going forward. And they are calling on the government to stand by their commitment to maintain the biodiversity of our water and supporting among many species, but certainly our resident killer whale population. They cite huge concerns with the non-scientific direction that the government is going in regards to trying to support this project, and are urging them to look at science as opposed to non-science, we'll say. I guess the question, Mayor Little, and I certainly, understand the position you take in regards to trade, and, we're a port city. But I just wonder, like, when is it going to be enough? Like, population increase, is it just going to continue to go up and up and up and up and up? Like, when do we say as a community, as a society, as a country, that we just cannot impact? I mean, all we ever do now is talk about the environment, and yet we just don't walk the talk. I mean, last week, I will say we had a release of in-camera decisions in regards to the urban containment boundary in Surrey to expand a light industrial into a sensitive ecosystem impacting the Little Campbell River in South Surrey. I debated and argued for 4 hours on the Metro board. It passed 69 to 65. It's a horrible decision, all because municipalities in the past have rezoned light industrial to residential. We needed to find a way to replace the light industrial that we lost. So now we're rezoning green space and farmland. And then we talk about food security and protecting water and protecting habitat, water security. When does the economy take the back seat to the environment instead of the environment taking a back seat to the economy? How much more stuff do we all need? You talk about the fact that if we don't get these products to these communities, they're going to be, it's going to be detrimental to them. But I mean, there's so many examples of all sorts of communities being impacted detrimentally because of growth and the economy and money and the wheel going round and round and round. And it's not getting us anywhere. It's making things worse. We can't have it both ways. We have to make some hard choices. We have to pull back, and we're one of the biggest consumers in the world, and it's frightening because we're certainly not one of the most populated countries in the world. But it is frightening, population increase, and what's happening to our planet. I think it's, I don't think the economy is going to matter when the environment's gone. And I can't believe that this seems so simple. This seems such an easy one for me. We don't want to, impact these very sensitive ecosystems that have already been impacted, and we're impacting them more because why? Because we need to move stuff. You're going to tell your grandchildren that the whales died because we needed more trade? I think not. So I'm totally in support of writing a letter. I'm going to forward the letter that I got from Dr. Ashley to council so you can read it. I think there has to be alternatives to all of this and a different way of doing business.
All right, thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. With my appreciation to Councillor Curran for bringing this motion forward. Appreciate everyone's comments. And I tend to agree with a number of your comments, Your Worship. I don't think this is totally a black and white issue. And there's all sorts of benefits to trade, and certainly the demand for goods shipped in containers is continuing to grow, and it does benefit a lot of areas around the world who benefit from this sort of trade, whether it's, as you said, potash, sulfur, some of the many things that go through our ports. I guess I would just say right now, I don't feel like I have all of the information I need to support this. And I know it is only writing a letter, but I feel like, this is something that's been in the works for a long time. So I do need to take some time to learn a bit more about this particular expansion, but I'm not prepared to support writing a letter of opposition right now.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Quite frankly, I don't know enough about this project. I know some about it, but I don't know enough about it. And we're not allowed to abstain from voting. We either vote in favor or we vote against. And I'm in favor of protecting the whales and all of this sea life. But I also am in favor of trade. I think it's necessary in an economy, and we haven't come up with a better solution at the moment. Maybe that's what we need to do, is come up with a better solution. I don't know. But I don't know enough about this project to vote in favor of writing the letter. So I'm not going to support this. It can be brought back to council at a later time. But I even question that kind of thing. I think all of us on council, we're spending a lot of time talking about things that aren't directly impacted by us, whereas maybe we could all individually, if we felt strongly about something, write a letter. So instead of one letter coming from the district, if we all wrote a letter, if that's how we felt, that might have a little bit, saying that we're councillors of the district, that might have a little bit more impact. But I sometimes think that when these things that aren't directly connected to the district and yet they come up on the agenda, I have some concerns that they sort of eat up time, like we're going to run till 11 o'clock tonight, but they eat up time, and that's not to say they're not important. I just think that this was a lot to this agenda for tonight. There was a lot to digest in here, a lot of important things. And I simply didn't have the time to look into this more before I place a vote on it. So I'm going to vote against it because I don't know enough.
Very much. Move around my screen here a smidge. Some stuff is blocked. Okay. Next speaker I have is Councillor Curran.
Did I have time left, Mayor Little?
Yes, you have 2 more minutes.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks to Councillor Muir and Councillor Bond for supporting that. And Councillor Muir, you reminded me of one of the reasons that actually really sent me over the top back in was it August of 2018 when, was it I'm trying to remember, 35, when the orca was pushing her dead baby around for 17 days. And I thought, when is enough enough? And that wasn't enough. That was enough for me. We have to imagine, life has been evolving on this planet that we're all so lucky to be floating on right now for 3.6 billion years. And this damage that we have caused in just hundreds of years is completely avoidable. And I just would really encourage everyone to imagine of such a different world that we can create. Like, we are told by all of the world scientists that we are the last generation that has the best chance to avoid billions of people and animals from suffering. And we can't get past this idea that the economy comes first. And I do believe, despite all the odds, that it is possible. And so we know what happens if we maintain the status quo, and it is unconscionable. And we don't know what happens if we transform our systems. And I do think that things like this is, I have an obligation to we are all connected on this planet. We are connected to the species. We are connected to all the species, all the animals, and all the people. And so we need to get past this idea of municipal boundaries that is limiting us from the profound and deep transformation that is required of this generation in this time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor. I see no further speakers at this time, so I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor of sending the letter? And all those opposed? The matter is defeated with Mayor Little, Councillors Back, Forbes, and Hanson opposed. Okay, thank you very much, Council. Well, we did extend the meeting to 11 o'clock. I'm going to say that I don't think there's sufficient time for us to provide reports tonight. But Mr. Stewart, are there any operational updates that you would like to include in the meeting?
No, Your Worship, other than we continue to work with Metro on reinvigorating the treatment plant, and we'll provide council with further updates.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council, for your participation this evening. Thank you to all the members of staff that contributed to the meeting, and also